Chapter 1274. To be able to receive 2 compliments from Yang Chendong, Bai Shuang's identity as the army commander was confirmed. At this moment, Yang Chendong was in a very good mood. After crushing the attack of the 5 countries, the 50,000 Walla army cavalry would be in his pocket again. The next step was to wait for the snow to melt before launching an all-out attack. During this period, there were still many things that he needed to do. For example, continuously sending troops to the Ili region, continuously sending the people who wanted to migrate out, and letting the people from the outside bring them in, settling them down, and dividing the land equally, etc. Considering that there were many things to do, and that the war would start again after the spring, he had to stay here to set up the formation. Yang Chendong did not plan to return to Qiqian City. This time, he had to be separated from his wife and children again. Qiqian City. Long residence. The chief of public security, Long Tainan, was drawing Yang Duo's eyebrows in his bedroom. No one would have thought that the dignified Chief Long, who could make criminals tremble in fear, had such a gentle side. A man drawing a woman's eyebrows, this was a sign of the love between husband and wife. See Zhang Chang drawing eyebrows. Zhang Chang was from Pingyang during the Han Dynasty. During the Xian Emperor, he was the governor of the capital. Zhang Chang drawing eyebrows for his wife. In the past, it was said that husband and wife had a good relationship. Later generations combined the story of Zhang Chang drawing eyebrows, Han Shou stealing a woman, Xiang Ru stealing a jade, and Xin Yu's thin waist into the 4 great romantic affairs of the ancient times. Yang Duo, who was middle-aged but still had a beautiful face, was also enjoying this feeling at this moment. From time to time, her eyes would meet with Long Tinan's, and then she would smile. In an instant, the temperature of the entire room seemed to rise a lot. Okay, done. After finishing the last stroke, Long Tainan, who was bending over, laughed. Looking carefully in the mirror, Yang Duo's face showed a satisfied expression. Not bad, my husband's skills have improved again. That's true. Who asked me to have a lovely wife? Long Tainan laughed heartily after being praised. He was obviously very satisfied with this praise. In response, Yang Duo threw a smug expression, but in her heart, she was happy. Long Tainan was not her first wife, and she had a past that she could not bear to look back on. She originally thought that this was the end of her life, but she never thought that she would be able to have a second spring. Moreover, the relationship between the 2 of them was really good. They loved and respected each other, which made her very satisfied. It was because of this satisfaction, Yang Duo was willing to do anything for Long Tainan. Just like how she had sent a telegram to Hu Mang, the commander of the new army in the first city, for the sake of Ai Hui. She didn't know if it was appropriate, but she had done it out of love. Now that she thought about it, she had to inform Long Tainan. Otherwise, who knew if it would cause any misunderstandings? Husband, I sent a telegram to Commander Hu Mang yesterday. Oh. What? Long Tainan, who was washing his hands after putting down his brush, did not hear clearly at first. He thought that it was just a normal matter, but then he reacted. His hands that were reaching into the basin could not help but pause, and his entire body also froze. Yang Duo, who had been paying attention to Long Tainan, noticed this change. A look of heartache flashed in her eyes, and then she said, I recommended Director Qin to Commander Tiger Mane. When the content was said, Long Tainan had already turned around. With a trace of nervousness on his face, he said, Madam, how can you send such a telegram? This, why can't he? What's this? Director Qin is a talent to begin with. Didn't my husband say more than once that once he wants to lead troops into battle, he is also qualified to be a military commander? And I also know that you went to City Lord Yu Qian and Deputy Commander Leng Song of the Army Headquarters because of this matter. I saw that you were anxious, so I wanted to help you. Yang Duo naturally knew what Long Tainan was going to say. It was nothing more than that. It was best for women not to get involved in this matter, especially Yang Duo, who was Yang Chendong's 7th sister. Sometimes, she had to pay special attention to what she said or even what she expressed. How could Yang Duo not know this? A woman's virtue was to have no talent. Wasn't this a sentence that those scholars often said? However, she also knew that they were in Yang Xie's world now. Yang Chendong had said that men and women were equal. Since they were equal, why couldn't she do what men did? More importantly, she saw that Long Tainan had been busy because of this matter. She really wanted to help. After thinking about it, she simply sent a telegram to Commander Tiger's Mane in her own name. Of course, Yang Duo wasn't someone who didn't know the importance of things, especially now that Yang Xie's territory was getting bigger and bigger. As Yang Chendong's seventh sister, the weight of her words naturally became heavier and heavier. Therefore, she also specially sent a telegram to Yang Chendong, directly removing Long Tainan from the list. She only said that Qin Feng was a good person and a good seedling to be a general. She recommended him out of fairness. Yang Duo only knew that her husband was anxious because of this matter. As for what would happen after these two telegrams were sent, she didn't care. This was the willfulness of women. It was also the willfulness of Yang Chendong's sister. It must be known that even Yang Chendong's wives wouldn't speak about the appointment of a general because this involved a matter of principle, and that was that the harem couldn't interfere with politics. Yang Duo was Yang Chendong's sister. She wouldn't care about such things. She just did what she thought. What could she do? Long Tainan was a little speechless by Yang Duo's words. After his expression changed again and again, he finally returned to his previous gentle state and said, "Well, since the telegram has already been sent, then it's too late to say anything. It's just that Qin Feng is really a talent. Yes, this is a recommendation. Sixth brother should thank me." Yang Duo raised her head proudly and looked as if she was doing this for the public. Long Tainan saw this and could only bitterly smile. He knew that Yang Duo was helping him. How could he refute it? Besides, he was also wholeheartedly dedicated to the public. He was really recommending talents. At least as far as he knew, none of the candidates recommended by the military and the city lord's mansion could compare to Qin Feng. Qin Feng, the head of the operations department of the Ministry of Public Security, was a person with great power in the Ministry of Public Security. At the same time, he was also a young talent that Long Tainan appreciated very much. Despite the great migration, the proportion of natives in the land was very small. However, there were still some people who were unwilling to let the country die and did some small things in private. It was just that because the number of people was limited and the scale wasn't very large, it was naturally not good to send the nearby garrison to deal with this kind of movement. Therefore, this kind of thing was put on the Ministry of Public Security. This made them have an extra unit of the operations department in order to deal with these people who were always restless and would even use weapons to resist Yang Xie's forces. When it was first established, Long Tainan suppressed all the opposing opinions and entrusted Qin Feng, who was only 24 years old, with the heavy responsibility of becoming the head of the operations department. According to the military rank, he was directly given the rank of colonel. Facts also proved that this person didn't disappoint Long Tianan's expectations. In the past 2 years, dozens of big and small attacks eliminated many opposing forces under Yang Xie's forces, giving the people a stable society and space for development. For this, Qin Feng himself also made a lot of contributions and finally received the rank of colonel. This made him in the limelight in the Ministry of Public Security for a while, and he almost reached the height of Long Tainan, the chief. However, he was only less than 20 years old. With this kind of contribution, he couldn't be promoted in the Ministry of Public Security anymore. He couldn't give the position of chief to him. Even if he was a talent, because of the environment, he couldn't be promoted anymore. As a result, Qin Feng, who had made great contributions several times in a row, was given the title of Vice Chief of Public Security. This was already the limit. Because of this, in order to not delay this person's development, Long Tainan decided to send him to the military. This way, there would be room for improvement. This time, it just so happened that the new army was going to be changed into a new army group. Seeing that there were 3 army commander positions, he had an idea. For this matter, Long Tainan threw away his old face and went to look for City Lord Yu Qian, Deputy Commander Lang Song, and the others. Unfortunately, the effect wasn't very good. This didn't mean that Qin Feng wasn't capable enough or that his contributions weren't enough. It was just that he was still too young. If he was allowed to take the position like this, what would happen to the other senior people? Thus, Long Tainan only wrote Qin Feng's name in the recommendation letter from the Ministry of Public Security and then prepared to resign himself to fate. However, everyone knew that it was difficult to obtain such an important position just by relying on the recommendation of the Ministry of Public Security. This was where his worry lay. He didn't expect that Yang Duo would see it all. Then, she made a move. However, she was afraid that she wouldn't get permission, so she acted first and reported later. Originally, Yang Duo was prepared to tell Yang Qindong in person when he returned to Qian City for the new year. However, there was already news that the war in Qian City was tense and he might not return this new year, so she simply sent a telegram to express her intentions. Yang Duo didn't want her husband to worry too much. In addition, Qin Feng was indeed a talent, so she directly sent 2 telegrams in her own name. When the telegrams were received, Yang Qindong just glanced at them and put them aside. He casually said to Beta Persei, "My 7th sister is even recommending talents. Alright, go and check it out later and see who this Qin Feng is." After receiving the order, Beta Persei immediately nodded and went out to send telegrams to Yang Wu, who was staying in Qian City, and Yang San, who was the director of the security bureau. Since it was something that the young master was concerned about, it was not a small matter. In the beginning city, Tiger's Mane, who also received the telegram, revealed a helpless expression. The establishment of a new army was no longer a secret. With the help of the logistics commander, Yang Si, the soldiers had basically gathered, but the commander had not been completely decided yet. This gave Tiger's Mane, who was about to become the commander, a headache. Chapter 1275. Facing the 3 commanders' positions, the various factions all scrambled to sign up, and there were more than 40 candidates. At this point in time, Yang Shi wasn't as weak as before. His territory was enormous, his population was numerous, and his level of wealth had already arrived at a state that no one could compare to. Because of this, many internal factions had appeared. At first, they just wanted to protect their own interests and strengthen themselves. As they won more and more battles, their territories grew bigger and bigger. Conflicts of interests were inevitable. Among them, a few major forces had enough foundation and could influence many decisions and policies without anyone noticing. The most powerful of these factions were the 3 factions. The first was the elder faction. For example, Tiger's Mane, the Yang family servants, and some important factory managers and founders. Even though there were not many of them, they all occupied important positions. The second was the Cold Front faction. This was the elite of the elite, equipped with the best weapons and the best soldiers. Their strength was unimaginable. The third was the Red Nest faction. They mainly developed in the rear, acting as the main camp and supporting the development of the army. As Yang Xie developed, it also developed itself. Most of the time, even Yang Qindong had to consider their feelings when making certain decisions. The fourth was the Surrender faction. There were all kinds of talents among them, but it was undeniable that they had all joined the Yang faction from other factions for various reasons. Many of them had been forced to join, but as time passed, they settled down and became Yang Xie, especially the backbone of the 5-star army. There were actually differences among the 4 major factions. For example, the Crimson faction was also divided into the local faction, the old people in Crimson City, the Great Ming faction, the talents from Northern Ming and Southern Ming, and the foreign faction, the talents from outside Crimson City and Great Ming who came to Crimson City to develop. Apart from this, there were also some smaller factions, such as the Grassland faction, the Vietnamese faction, the Laotian faction, the Korean faction, and so on. It could be imagined that in the future, there would be the Japanese faction, the Ili faction, and many other factions. Yang Qindong was naturally aware of this, but in order to maintain a balanced relationship, he would not interfere unless it was too strong and threatened him. Where there were people, there would be Jianghu. Where there were benefits, there would be conflicts. This was something that no one could avoid. And with these relationships, it was impossible to be on good terms with all of them, but generally speaking, he had to get along with them. Just this time alone, almost all the major and minor factions had been mobilized for the position of the 3 army commanders. As long as there were such talents, they would constantly recommend them. Those who didn't have such talents were also recommended by the other faculties. They agreed to share the benefits. As the commander of an army, how much influence would he have if he obtained this position? How many officer positions would he be able to arrange? Just thinking about it made people envious. Because of this, Tiger's man had the biggest headache. As the new commander of the army, what he needed to do was not to be impartial. He needed to select the best talents and entrust them with important tasks. He also needed to balance the relationships between all parties. At the very least, he could not allow people to criticize him for any major problems. For a moment, he had a headache. But things had to be done. Soon, 2 candidates were submitted. After the review, they were basically approved. They were only waiting for the final order from the army headquarters. They were the 101st Army's commander, Lu Zhua, and the 102nd Army's commander, Ku Lu. Regardless of whether it was in terms of experience or ability, it was obvious to all. If they were promoted, no one would be able to say anything. But no one would have thought that such a problem would still occur. Division Commander Ku Lu was implicated by the new army's commander, Su He. He was given a warning and could not be promoted for half a year. This meant that he would miss this good opportunity. With one less competitor, Tiger's man said that he had one more choice. At this moment, Yang Duo's telegram was delivered to his desk. When this telegram was delivered, there was an attachment. It said that the same telegram was also delivered to Yang Chendong. Tiger's man could not ignore this. Who was Yang Duo? She was the young master's sister. As a servant of the Yang family, she was his master. At the same time, Yang Duo was also the only person from the Yang family that the young master brought to Qiqian City. Just based on this relationship, Tiger's man could not ignore it. Not to mention, the matter had already been reported to Yang Chendong. He did not dare to be careless. I have an impression of this Qin Feng. He was the candidate recommended by the Ministry of Public Security. We have also investigated him. He is quite capable, but he is too young. He is not even 27 years old. Tiger's man looked at the telegram and looked at Qin Feng's name. He could not help but say. Of course, he was not talking to himself. He was talking to Yang Si. They were both servants of the Yang family. Their relationship could not be compared to that of ordinary people. In particular, Yang Si was now the commander of the logistics department. In terms of power and the number of management personnel, he was no less than the commander of the first group. Regarding the important matter of selecting a commander, he called Yang Si over to discuss it. Yang Si did not speak at the moment. Instead, he held his chin and looked at Tiger's man as if he was looking at a rare animal. This kind of gaze had a hint of scrutiny, which immediately made the latter raise his eyebrows. I say, why are you looking at me like that? Are you looking for a kick? In the world, other than Yang Chendong, only Tiger's man could say that to someone like Yang Si that he was looking for a kick. They were both servants of the Yang family. Tiger's man could be said to be the boss and the immediate superior of everyone. Of course, he did not really want to kick anyone. It was just a kind of joke to show intimacy. However, there was a certain degree of pressure. At least, Yang Si, who was afraid of being kicked, immediately became serious. Tiger's man, don't talk about age. Young master is not even 30 years old. This sentence was said by Tiger's man. He was stunned. Yes, Yang Chendong was born in 1430. It would be half a month before he turned 30 years old. Looking at the group of servants, they were not old. None of them were over 30 years old. But which one of them did not hold great power? Yes, we shouldn't judge people based on age. But who are we? How can Qin Feng compare to us? Tiger's man was still a little unconvinced. Yes, Qin Feng can't compare to us, but he won't be too far behind. He was recommended by Miss Seven, and this matter has been reported to the young master. I think we should keep this position for now. If my guess is right, it won't be long before the young master receives news. We just have to wait. As for the last commander position, we have to decide quickly. After all, the three armies can't be without a commander for a day. Yang Si was able to become the logistics commander and manage the relationships between all parties very smoothly. He was a person with a clear mind. That was why he had such an analysis. Naturally, whether it was Tiger's man or Yang Si, with their status, they only had one master in their eyes, and that was Yang Chendong. As long as they served the young master well, they did not have to care about other people's opinions. But the problem was that this was recommended by Yang Duo. Even the young master would have some misgivings, so it was not up to them to think too much. Regarding Yang Si's ability, Hu Mang could be considered to be very familiar with it. Hearing him say this, he nodded and said, "Okay, since that's the case, we will leave a position. Now, let's discuss the last commander." At the end of December, 1460 was coming. It was only a few days before the 5-star army, and good news came one after another. First, the heavily surrounded 50,000 Walla cavalry finally chose to surrender. Their commander, Taiyin, also died of a serious illness due to his poor health. In the end, his subordinates chose to surrender to the 5-star army. To be able to become Walla's elite cavalry, their strength was very good. As long as they changed their mindset, once they joined the 5-star army, they would definitely be a group of elite soldiers with decent strength. These people did not need to undergo any systematic training at all. As long as they adapted to the military rules of the 5-star army, they would quickly become qualified soldiers. This was equivalent to having an additional 50,000 reserve troops. For the 5-star army that entered the Yilabali area, this was a force that could not be ignored. Second, the scouts had sent back accurate information. Under the leadership of Yeshen, 60,000 Walla cavalry crossed the Altai Mountains and entered the northern grasslands. This kind of decision to leave in a hurry already proved that they were afraid of becoming enemies with the 5-star army. It was believed that as long as this trend continued, they would not dare to become enemies with the 5-star army. This indirectly meant that when the 5-star army conquered the Yilabali area, there would be one less strong opponent. Third, the new army would be officially established a few days later on the 1st of January 1460. The commander of the army, Tiger's Mane, had 3 armies and 1 division directly under him. Each division had 4 divisions, each division had 4 regiments, a total of 33,600 people in each army. The army had about 118,000 combat personnel, logistics personnel, and mechanical personnel. Commander Tiger's Mane, 101st Army Commander Lu Zhua, 102nd Army Commander He Chong, who was selected from countless people. He had served as a squad leader, platoon leader, company commander, battalion commander, and deputy commander in the Cold Vanguard Army. He later served as the deputy chief of staff in the army headquarters, 103rd Army Commander Qin Feng, recommended by Yang Chendong and approved by Yang Chendong, and the new division directly under him, Dengyu. Fourth, the migration of 2 million people from the Yangtze provinces were entering the first city in batches. From there, they would gradually replace the people in the Yilabali area and become the new owners of the area. Everything seemed to be in order. Yang Chendong's territory was Lufan City. Once this area was occupied, it would become the capital. Now, a lot of boulders and cement were being transported to the city. They were just waiting for spring to start building the city. At this moment, Yang Chendong looked like he was going to go to war and would not stop until he occupied this area. This posture also made Yilabali, Turkmenistan, and Yarqiang very nervous. After the 5-star army failed twice, the Walla cavalry left and the Kazakh army retreated in fear. At this time, they no longer had any outside help. Chapter 1276. Before this, the 5 countries working together did not cause any problems for the 5-star army. Now that there were only 3 countries left, they were even more terrified. Seeing that the five-star army might launch a large-scale attack, after a series of discussions, the three kings decided to ask for help from the Kazakh Khanate. Not only that, but they also asked for help from the Aries dynasty. Needless to say, Kazakh was connected to the Ili region, and they were in danger of dying. After the three countries promised to provide grain and a certain amount of gold and silver, even if it was for their own safety, they had to send troops once more. The Aries dynasty was the predecessor of Iran. Under the leadership of Wuzong Hasan, they had just defeated the Black Goat dynasty. They were at the peak of their military strength and wanted to expand outwards. The three countries took the initiative to ask for help while paying a certain amount of gold and silver. This was what Wuzong Hasan wanted, and they quickly came to a decision to send troops. King Hasan was born in a Turkmen noble family and believed in the Sunnis. He knew the Quran and was familiar with Turkic, Persian, and Arabic. He worshipped martial arts and was brave and smart. Since young, he had ambitions that were different from normal people. At this moment, he had just dealt with the Black Goat dynasty, and his strength was at its peak. The number of cavalry under him had reached 300,000. Raising these troops for nothing was a huge financial burden, but he could not find a suitable target to attack all of a sudden. Now that the three countries had sent themselves to his door, how could he not take it? Both sides agreed that after the Aries dynasty opened up, they would move towards the three countries and work together to fight the five-star army. The year 1460 had finally arrived. During the new year, the various troops gathered here. Yang Qindong drank and chatted with the various generals in the palace. This was a rare gathering. Yang Qindong took the opportunity to adjust the deployment of the army and formulate a military plan for the annexation of Yilianli. This time, the higher-ups of the five-star army who attended the banquet had 5 people. They were the 1st Cavalry Division's Tiger's Man, the new army's commander Su He, Shirwan Shan, the 1st Race's commander Bai Shuang, and the 2nd Race's commander Niu Duo. Apart from that, there was the Mongol Alliance Army's commander Narasong, 30,000 cavalry under him, the 4th Division Ling Feng, the Liaodong 1st Cavalry Division's Dai Qua, and some other direct regiments. All in all, the five-star army had gathered up to 200,000 troops. This did not include the 150,000 captives from the past few battles and the 100,000 reserve troops sent by Yang Si, the logistics commander of the first city. With these sufficient reserves, no matter which army or division suffered losses in the following battles, they would be able to quickly replenish their losses. This was something that the other powers could not compare to. Not only that, Turpan, Baispali, and Hobak Seri had nearly 2 million civilians from the other provinces of the Yang family. They were waiting for the five-star army to take over the new cities and redistribute the new lands after their victory. Taking advantage of the 3 months of continuous heavy snow, Yang Qindong had made all the preparations. He had also accumulated a large amount of military supplies in the 3 cities. Once they were ready, he would be able to wield his troops and be invincible with just one order. Compared to Yang Qindong's ample preparations, the 3 countries did not surrender without a fight. After failing to send envoys to make peace, they also contacted the Kazakh Khanate and the Aries dynasty respectively. The former decided to send 100,000 troops, while the latter sent 150,000. If one added in the troops of the 3 countries, the total number was close to 1 million. Another huge war was unavoidable. In the banquet, everyone only drank and talked, the atmosphere was not bad. On the 2nd day after the banquet, when everyone arrived at the military conference hall in the palace and saw Jean Xian's sand table in front of them, all the military officers' faces turned solemn. Yang Qindong was still dressed in a clean green robe, holding a thin and sturdy pointer in his hand. Before he even opened his mouth, he had already attracted everyone's attention. Generals, our intelligence department received important news a few days ago. The Ili region, Turpan, and Yarkiang tribes have already secretly asked for help from the Kazakh and Aries dynasty. After paying a certain price, they have already persuaded the 2 countries to send 200,000 cavalry to fight a decisive battle with our five-star army. Apart from this, the 3 countries have each recruited 50,000 soldiers. If we add it all up, our opponents this time are close to 1 million. Yang Chendong's voice resounded in the conference hall. When the generals heard this, their faces all turned red in excitement. Generals who led soldiers to war were not afraid of battle. The more enemies there were, the more merits there would be, and the more opportunities they would have to show off. Seeing the generals' high fighting spirits, Yang Chendong was also very happy. He had not expected the Aries dynasty to suddenly jump out. His original plan was to head west and fight whatever he saw, but he did not know where to start. Now, the Aries dynasty and the Kazakh Khanate had both taken the initiative to jump out. This was the best thing that could happen. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with the general's fighting spirit and morale. He raised the pointer in his hand, and the conference hall immediately became quiet again. This time, we only have more than 200,000 soldiers, and we have to face an opponent that is at least 3 times our number. I want to say that everyone must be cautious and not be arrogant and underestimate the enemy. Of course, the fact is not that scary. We have already investigated. After 2 conscriptions, the men of the 3 countries are all gone. In other words, they do not have the ability to conscript again in a short period of time. However, we are different. We have a solid rear. For now, we have more than 200,000 reserve troops. At the same time, there are 100,000 foreign soldiers from various provinces gathering in the logistics headquarters in the beginning city. They will soon set off for us to be our solid backing. Everyone, there is no need to hold back in the next battle. When you see the enemy, just fight. Beat them fiercely until they surrender. Beat them until they are convinced. As for the inevitable sacrifices in the process, I only want to say that no matter how much you lose, you will be replenished. If a battalion is wiped out, you will take another battalion. If a division is wiped out, you will take another division. In short, you can only advance and not retreat. Those who do not listen to military orders and are afraid of the enemy will be dealt with according to military law. Do you understand? Yang Chendong's face was serious, and his eyes flashed with a cold light. The generals of the 5-star army were all veterans. They should not be afraid of the enemy, but they still had to be clear about the rules. Therefore, when Yang Chendong's cold eyes swept across the crowd, everyone raised their heads, puffed out their chests, and answered loudly, "Understood." Very good. The new army will be the vanguard in the middle, the new 5-star army will be the left vanguard, the first outsider army will be the right vanguard, and your third army will be the vanguard. After the battle begins, all of you will be the vanguard. If you see a city, you can go around it and leave it for the middle army to deal with. In short, charge into the enemy's forces as fast as you can and turn them upside down. Leng Feng's 4th Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, the Mongol Alliance Army, and Liaodong's 1st Division, Dai Qua, will be in the middle army with me. While supporting the vanguard, you will be in charge of attacking the enemy's cities. The 2nd Outsider Army will be in charge of logistics and backup, and be ready to join the battle at any moment. Orders after orders came out of his mouth. All the generals who were called out stood up straight and answered. The entire meeting room was filled with a sense of nervousness and majesty before a huge battle. 3 Eastern Province. This was a huge province that had just been established half a year ago. It was responsible for protecting Liaodong, developing agriculture, and logistics. As the great general, Yi Ligang had a heavy responsibility. In just half a year, he had clashed with the Baiming army in the Liaodong region more than 10 times. He had suppressed them to the south of the logistics line and ensured that the 5-star army had enough supplies. As a surrendered general, Yi Ligang was entrusted with a heavy responsibility. After obtaining sufficient military and financial power, he also fully demonstrated his talent. After personally commanding several battles, he also established enough prestige in the army of the 3 eastern provinces. In the past 6 months, it was also the happiest 6 months in Yi Ligang's life. He could finally exert his strength without any restrictions. Watching the army become stronger day by day under his own integration, and seeing that the people had food to eat and clothes to wear this winter under Yang Chendong's policy of not collecting agricultural taxes for 2 years, he felt infinite pride in his heart. Wasn't this the life he had always wanted, the life he had always wanted to see. He did not expect it to come true like this. In comparison, looking at the Biming civilians living outside the three eastern provinces, they were still the same. They did not have enough food and clothes, and they were still suffering. At this moment, Yi Ligang only hoped that Bugnam of Gojoseon could quickly solve the problems in the Ili region and return to Liaodong to save more Han civilians. With such thoughts in his heart, Yi Ligang had been working hard. Together with Governor Lu Ji, they did their best to manage the three eastern provinces and increase their strength. It was the new year. After Yi Ligang paid a visit to Governor Lu Ji in the morning, he returned to his own residence and celebrated the arrival of the new year with the people in the Yi residence. He firmly believed that each year in the future would be better and stronger than the previous year. However, just as the entire residence and city was celebrating, an uninvited guest suddenly appeared outside the Yi residence. Under the lead of the unattractive butler, he came to Yi Ligang's study room. Chapter 1277. At this moment, Yi Ligang's face no longer had the happy smile he had during the new year. There was only a cold expression. Especially after the person was brought in front of him, he said with a frosty expression, "I really didn't expect that Tongji Dai would travel thousands of miles to come to our remote place during the new year. He really put a lot of thought into this." Standing across from Yi Ligang was the Biming embroidered uniform guards commander, Dai Qing. Dai Qing and Yi Ligang were old acquaintances. In the past, Dai Qing was a small official in the embroidered uniform guard in the new, Gandusi district. Later on, he went to the capital. However, he didn't expect that when he came back, he was already a lower third-rank official. Hearing Yi Ligang's words, Dai Qing's face was filled with displeasure. He was a member of the embroidered uniform guard. During the Great Ming Dynasty, regardless of whether it was the nobility or the ministers, or the commoners, their faces would change at the mention of his name. In the past, Yi Ligang was only an insignificant commander. Seeing him, not only was he not afraid, he even dared to mock him. This made Dai Qing's face very uncomfortable. Following this, he didn't wait for Dai Qing to invite him and found a place to sit. "You can leave first." Looking at the housekeeper standing outside the door, Yi Ligang lightly waved his hand. Although Dai Qing was an unwelcome guest and should have been taken down on the spot, since he had come, Yi Ligang was very curious about what he wanted to say. So what if he left him alive for a while? There were no outsiders in the room. Yi Ligang's face became very serious. "Speak, what business do you have?" Dai Qing didn't mind Yi Ligang's lack of respect. He had already thought about this when he came. Moreover, in the Great Ming Dynasty, the Taijin guards and the Eastern faction guards were very majestic. In reality, they were looked down upon by many people on the righteous path. They could only survive in the darkness and were hated by everyone. However, despite knowing this, Dai Qing still had to come. This was an order from above. If he didn't come, there was only one path left, death. If he came, perhaps there would be a glimmer of hope. "General Yi, let's not beat around the bush. This time, I came on the orders of the emperor to persuade you to turn back." "Oh, that's right, I have a letter that eunuch Gao wrote for you." As he spoke, Dai Qing reached into his bosom and took out a well-wrapped letter before handing it over. The so-called Gao Gonggang was the supervising eunuch of the Biming Imperial Horse Directorate, Gao Rang. He was also a eunuch with a high position and power. In terms of status, he was second only to Jining. Yi Ligang naturally knew this person. In the past, he would think of ways to give some salary to these supervisor eunuchs during festivals. This was not to say that he wanted to surrender to the other party, but to prevent the other party from finding trouble with him. Who said that she had to do something just because she gave him a gift? It was already very fortunate that these eunuchs were not looking for trouble. Since the other party had written a letter, Yi Ligang opened it with the thought that there was no harm in reading it. He had even thought that he would definitely turn these letters in when he returned. At this time, his heart was completely focused on Yang Xie. Seeing that the people had already seen the hope of a better life, he would not allow anyone to destroy or take back all of this. Yi Ligang held a firm belief in his heart, but after reading this letter, his expression changed again and again. At this time, he was no longer as full of confidence as before. This was because this letter recorded some of the matters of Song Quan's family. Song Quan had once been the commander of the new, Ergon capital region and had been Yi Ligang's immediate superior. It could be said that he had taken good care of Yi Ligang. When the 5-star army had arrived at the city walls, he had not hesitated to commit suicide to save Yi Ligang's life and give him a great merit. In Yi Ligang's heart, Song Quan was his blood brother. His blood brother's family was naturally his family, not to mention that he had promised Song Quan before he died. Not to mention that Yi Ligang did not have a family now. Even if he did, if someone threatened him like this, he would not be moved at all. In his heart, there was always a balance. But if it was Song Quan's family, it was very different. He was willing to die for this promise. From this letter, it could be seen that Song Quan's family had been threatened by Gao Rang, or even deeply. If he did not agree to the other party's request, he was afraid that the family would not have a good ending. With the usual style of the embroidered uniform guard, there was no need to say anything about not harming the family. Yi Ligang's expression changed again and again. At this moment, he was somewhat out of his wits. When Dai Qing saw this, a gloomy smile flashed across his face. In this world, everyone had a weakness, and the embroidered uniform guard were people who were good at finding this weakness. Now, he was even more certain that this mission should not be difficult to complete. At this moment, in an adjacent alley outside the Yi residence, the figure of the Yi residence's housekeeper appeared. After making a few turns, he arrived in front of a small courtyard and gently knocked on the door. Then, the door opened and the figure flashed in. Yi Ligang did not know where the housekeeper went, but at this moment, he did not care at all. After carefully reading the letter 3 times, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Dai Qing with a fierce gaze. He said, "What do you want?" This was a negotiation. Dai Qing's face showed a happy expression. He clasped his hands and said, "General Yi, you are the pillar of our Baiming army. You must understand the principle of a fine bird choosing a tree to nest in. This time, Eunuch Gao wants you to know the way back and lead the army back to Baiming's embrace. As long as General Yi does this, the emperor will be very happy. At that time, a high position and a good salary will be just around the corner." Dai Qing pretended to congratulate Yi Ligang, as if Yi Ligang was about to soar to the top. But Yi Ligang did not dare to believe a word of this. What emperor's expectation? All of this should be Gao Rang's doing. Using the son of an old friend to threaten people, such a trick could only be done by the embroidered uniform guard and the East faction. But knowing this, how should he choose? If he agreed, he would violate his oath and life goal, and he would betray Yang Chendong's trust in him. If he did not agree, he would betray the dead Song Quan. It was a dilemma, and he could not make a decision. Dai Qing looked at Yi Ligang's hesitation and did not mean to urge him. He was a eunuch with a certain degree of cultural foundation and knew that more haste, less speed. This time, he came to put pressure on the other party, and did not expect to force the other party to speak. This time, he mainly came to inform the other party. He believed that after some time, he should know what to choose. "Okay, the letter has been delivered. I will come back in 3 days. At that time, I hope General Yi can think clearly and make the wisest decision. Goodbye." Dai Qing also knew that this was the territory of the 5-star army. It would be inconvenient for him to stay here for a long time. He did not wait for Yi Ligang to speak and turned to leave after saying this. Just like when he came, Dai Qing deliberately wore a cotton hat. It was a common thing to wear in the cold 3 northeastern provinces, but it could better cover his face. When he walked out of the Yi mansion, he intentionally looked left and right. When he did not find anything out of the ordinary, he walked away with large strides. To be able to become a member of the embroidered uniform guard, he had undergone a certain amount of harsh training. To be able to become a lower 3rd rank official like the commander, Dai Qing's skills were not bad. However, what he didn't know was that there was always someone stronger. In terms of skills, the people of the 5-star Army's intelligence bureau were not much worse than him. Especially the people of the action team, their abilities were not weak. Just as Dai Qing thought that he had left the Yi residence without anyone noticing and was heading towards the place where he had landed, a commoner carrying firewood was following him from a distance. After following him for 3 streets and seeing him enter an inconspicuous courtyard, he quickly turned around and headed back the way he had come. Not long after, the firewood seller appeared in front of the Yi mansion's housekeeper and another young man. "Manager, I've found the corner. It's a secluded courtyard on the South Street." "Very good, immediately bring people to keep an eye on that place." The young man who was called the manager nodded in satisfaction. Then he said to the housekeeper beside him, "You should go back. You've been out for a long time, don't make people suspicious." "Okay." After the housekeeper agreed, he quickly pushed open the door and left. The manager's eyes flashed with a light. After standing there for a while, he turned around and walked into the depths of the courtyard. Yi Ligang probably didn't know that when Yang Xie gave him this mansion, including the housekeeper and servants, there were many spies. It was still the same saying, don't doubt the people you use, even if you suspect them, use them. Originally, Yi Ligang didn't have a family. His parents and brothers were no longer around. For such a person, how could he not take any precautions when he could use him? Not only was he prepared, but the Yangxia Security Bureau's stronghold in the 3 eastern provinces was near the Yi mansion to prevent any accidents. Unexpectedly, there was actually someone who came to find Yi Ligang. Although the housekeeper didn't know the identity of the other party, the words, Dai Tongji, already exposed a lot of problems. At the very least, this person wasn't a Yangxia person. From his official position, it was very likely that he was a Biming official. The manager's surname was Ning and his name was Gang. As the highest level existence of the Security Bureau in the 3 eastern provinces, his main purpose was to find out some military information about the Biming army and to become enemies with the brocade-gowned guards. Yang Qindong had never been careless about the brocade-gowned guards. To be able to become such a notorious existence, whether it was in history or movies, was enough to prove their influence and destructive power. It was because of this that Yang Qindong had long ago entrusted the Wolf Fang Special Forces to send instructors to the Security Bureau and the CIA. A real intelligence officer should be proficient in both the pen and the sword. Especially as Yang Xie's territory grew bigger and bigger, there were likely to be more and more tricks in the dark. He had to be prepared. Chapter 1278. Money and manpower were Yang Qindong's biggest advantages. Whether it was the Security Bureau or the CIA, they had developed strongly over the years, and many outstanding talents had emerged. Ning Gang was one of them. He graduated with excellent results in the graduation examination and stayed with Director Yang San for half a year. After his vision and thinking had been greatly improved, he was finally demoted and became the intelligence director of the Security Bureau in the 3 eastern provinces. Previously, he had sent people to obtain some military information about the Biming army through various means. Once, he was even praised by the higher-ups. However, he had never fought with his old rival, the brocade-gowned guards. So, many of the things he learned could not be used. Now that they had finally appeared, Ning Gang was very excited. Ning Gang, who had studied systematically, knew that it was often times like this that he had to remain calm. When he thought of Director Yang San's calm choices in the face of various situations, he forcibly suppressed the urge to arrest them. The founder of the Security Bureau was, without a doubt, Yang Qindong. He had performed many similar tasks in his life and was familiar with this aspect. He selected some selected training, improved it, and handed it over to Tiger's man. Later, Yang Qindong was promoted by the deputy director and learned a lot from Yang Qindong. It could be said that he had completely inherited the mantle. As one of the students that Yang San was very satisfied with, Ning Gang naturally would not be too bad. He knew that the brocade-gowned guards was a powerful organization. Once they appeared, they would not be alone. In order to complete the task, they often did not even form a team. Usually, they would have a backup plan. His task was to find out all the members of the brocade-gowned guards that had appeared. He absolutely could not leave a little bit of trouble behind. If they wanted to do this, they would have to rely on Dai Tongji. At this time, Dai Qing did not know that he was being watched. In the past, he had also come to the Liaodong region for missions and secretly dealt with some disobedient officials. There had never been any problems. Now, these people only had a change of master, but the place had not changed. What was there to be afraid of? Without the slightest precaution, Dai Qing only made a few necessary anti-tracking actions. After finding nothing unusual, he returned to his temporary residence and met the 6 brothers who stayed here. "Sir, you're back. Did everything go well?" Seeing Dai Qing return, a man about 25 or 26 years old with long eyebrows like willows and a jade-like body quickly came up to greet him. This person's surname was Yao and his given name was Shi. He was the person that Dai Qing valued the most. No matter where he went, Dai Qing would bring him along. However, very few people knew that although Dai Qing looked very masculine, he had different preferences from others. This Yao Shi was the person he liked the most. There were many things that he would not tell others, but he would never hide them from Yao Shi. Therefore, he was the only one among the 6 who knew the rough details of the mission. As soon as he saw Yao Shi, Dai Qing's heart skipped a beat. Since he was in a good mood, he naturally spoke more casually. "I've talked to him. There shouldn't be any problems. However, we still need to make another preparation. If he doesn't agree after 3 days, prepare to kidnap him. It doesn't matter if he's dead or alive. This is the consequence of betraying the Baiming. How about this, Shi-er, go inform the other team and have them prepare to act at any time." No matter what, Dai Qing was still a commander in the embroidered uniform guard. There were many people with status who knew him. Although he had disguised himself, it would be best if he did not appear in public. It would save him a lot of trouble. This time, if it wasn't to gain Yi Ligang's trust, he would not have personally come. However, he would never have thought that he had already been exposed. In his opinion, Yi Ligang would definitely not report this matter to the 5-star army for the safety of Song Quan's family. Even if he wanted to report it, it would not be so fast. Therefore, he should be very safe right now. The other operation team had 20 people. They were all highly skilled in martial arts. Once they used force, it would not be a problem for them to kill their way into the Yi residence. However, only Dai Qing and Yao Shi knew about the existence of this small team. It was not convenient for him to appear, so he could only send his confidant. "Be careful on the road. This is Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory." Although he did not think there would be any safety issues, Dai Qing still reminded Yao Shi. "Yes." Yao Shi agreed with a smile. He then went into the central room and put on a thick coat, wrapping his entire body in it. Seeing that there were no more problems, he left the courtyard under Dai Qing's watchful gaze and headed straight for another settlement. Yao Shi's level was far worse than Dai Qing's. He was only chosen because of his good looks. In terms of professional level, he was too far behind. After he was discharged from the hospital, he only nervously looked around. When he did not see anything special, he went to the location of the other team. Behind him, at least 3 secret agents of the Security Bureau were alternately following him. The sky finally darkened. In the inconspicuous courtyard where Ning Gang lived, a large group of agents of the Security Bureau had already gathered. At this time, each of them had their chests puffed out and their eyes shone brightly as they waited for the final order. After an afternoon of investigation, the group of embroidered uniform guards, a total of 27 people in 2 locations, safely fell into Ning Gang's line of sight. After repeatedly confirming that the embroidered uniform guards did not have any backup plans, Ning Gang decided to make his move. He also wanted to know the purpose of the embroidered uniform guards. Although through ordinary observation, this Yi Ligang was still very trustworthy. However, if something were to happen, it would be better to capture him and personally ask him. Teams 1, 2, 3, and 3 are responsible for capturing people. Teams 4, 5, and 6 are responsible for internal security. In the event of an accident, help at any time. Teams 7, 8, and 9 are responsible for the outermost security. Team 10 is responsible for secretly watching. In the event of an accident, immediately contact the 5-star army stationed in the city and seal off the 4 cities. In short, not a single embroidered uniform guard is allowed to escape. Ning Gang looked at the 10 operation team captain standing in front of him with a trace of killing intent in his eyes as he spoke. A team of 10 people, a total of 100 operation team members. This was the armed force in Ning Gang's hands. Other than that, he also had an intelligence team and a tracking team under him. In the event of a major incident, he also had the authority to mobilize the nearby troops at any time. Ning Gang had mobilized all the operation team members just to capture 27 embroidered uniform guards. This was how careful Ning Gang was. He deeply remembered what Director Yang Chendong had said before. This was also what Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Chendong had taught them. As a qualified intelligence officer, succeeding 99 times was not something to be proud of. This was because as long as you failed once, all your previous efforts would be wasted. Therefore, every mission had to be completed with a 100% commitment. Even a lion would use all its strength to catch a rabbit. Each team received the mission and received the blueprints of the 2 courtyards from the intelligence team. After a thorough understanding and a reasonable plan of action, everyone set off at the designated time and went straight to the 2 targets. In the courtyard of the first target, Dai Qing was holding Yao Shi. The 2 hadn't started doing anything yet. They were resting on the side of the bed. Yao Shi tried his best to say nice things to please Dai Qing, but for some reason, the effect was not good today. His backer, who was also his direct superior, was always absent-minded. This was the fundamental quality of a special agent. They were born with an extremely strong sense of danger. For some reason, after dinner, Dai Qing always felt his heartbeat become unstable, as if something big was going to happen. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure it out. He looked down at Yao Shi, who was still smiling at him in his arms. Dai Qing asked in an absolutely gentle tone, "When you went out today, you didn't notice anything else, right?" "No, what else could there be? No one here will recognize me." Yao Shi shook his head and said innocently. Yao Shi had not joined the embroidered uniform guards for long, and his ancestral home was in the south. In Liaodong, no one knew him. He didn't even have an old friend. So there shouldn't be any problems. Could it be that he was thinking too much? How could Dai Qing know that the problem was him? Instead, he was the one who implicated Yao Shi. Dai Qing couldn't think of a reason, so he stopped thinking about it. Instead, when he looked at Yao Shi, his eyes revealed a fiery expression. Filthy words came out of his mouth, "Little darling, the night is long." Just when he was about to do something, his ears suddenly moved. He seemed to hear a muffled sound in the courtyard. Who is it? As expected of a middle-level cadre in the embroidered uniform guards, he instantly exclaimed. Following this shout, the door was suddenly kicked open from the outside. Then, 2 shadows pounced on him from the left and right. Aya! Yao Shi, who had already taken off his shirt, cried out in alarm when he saw this scene. Dai Qing, who was also half naked, reacted immediately. He grabbed the pillow in his hand and threw it out with a whoosh. Taking advantage of the moment when the headrest was thrown away, his body leaped out like a spirit fox, rushing out of the room and landing in the courtyard. It was when he entered the courtyard that Dai Qing's expression froze. At this time, he noticed that there were 5 men in black standing in front of him. They were surrounding him in a semicircle. Who are you people? In his heart, he knew that he had encountered a thief. In front of these bandits who killed without batting an eye, his so-called embroidered uniform guard name might not be useful. So after saying this, he added, "If you are looking for money, I am willing to give you money. Since you are outside, please make things easy." Chapter 1279. Cut the crap. Capture him. I want him alive. The leader of the 5 people was Ning Gang. He was worried about the situation here, so he personally led the team here. At the same time, this was his first time dealing with the Imperial Secret Service, so he wanted to test the other party's strength. When the 4 team members beside him heard the supervisor's words, they rushed forward without another word. However, in order to capture him alive, they abandoned their weapons and rushed forward with their bare hands. What a good Dai Qing! Facing the 4 people rushing at him with a half-naked body, he was fearless. His fist was like the wind as he met them head-on. With a dull thud, the operation team member staggered back 3 steps, revealing an opening. With one punch, he forced an operation team member to retreat. However, Dai Qing's expression also froze. Although he did not use his full strength in that punch, he still used 70% of it. He originally thought that he would be able to send the person flying, but he only retreated 3 steps. It seemed that the other party did not come with good intentions and was not weak. In the blink of an eye, the other 3 team members rushed forward together. For a moment, punches and kicks rained down on Dai Qing's body like a storm. Dai Qing, who protected his head with both hands and his key parts, took several fierce punches. Taking advantage of the opponent's first wave of attacks, before the second wave of attacks came, his body suddenly rushed in one direction. With a mountain lean, he knocked one of the operation team members to the ground. Then, with a long leg sweep, he knocked another team member to the ground. After that, he extended his free hands and smashed towards the last team member. This series of reactions happened in the blink of an eye. The remaining operation team member kept retreating. His hands kept moving in front of him to protect himself, and at the same time, he wanted to dissipate the power of Dai Qing's attacks. After 3 consecutive punches, he still did not knock the opponent down. Dai Qing was anxious. He did not know how many tricks the opponent had. He could not delay and had to end the battle quickly. At that moment, he stopped abruptly. Then, he raised his right leg and kicked the side of the team member's head with great force. Fortunately, the team member was somewhat prepared and protected his head. However, the powerful force still made him retreat continuously. Bang! Dai Qing, who had just finished his kick and was about to rush out, was suddenly knocked down to the ground by a long leg sweep. It was Ning Gang, who had not made a move until now, who had finally made his move. This kick was extremely fast. Dai Qing was unable to react in time and suffered a loss. However, his skills were extraordinary after all, and he had experienced countless life and death battles. Therefore, the moment he fell to the ground, he took the opportunity to roll like a donkey, then flipped over and quickly stood up. Dai Qing had just steadied himself when another fist came crashing down. Out of instinct, Dai Qing countered with a punch. Then, with a muffled bang, a great pain came from his fist. He couldn't help but take 4 steps back before he could stand firm. Needless to say, the one who attacked was Ning Gang. Since his first attack had failed, he would throw another punch. What he wanted was to seize the absolute initiative. After launching a kick and a punch, Ning Gang had already entered the zone. His body was as light as a swallow as he leaped up and launched a chain of 3 kicks at Dai Qing, who was still retreating. Tong tong tong, there were several fierce attacks. When Dai Qing felt that both his arms were in so much pain that he couldn't even lift them up, he suddenly felt a pain in his legs. It was still a long leg sweeping attack. Once again, he was hit and fell to the ground. After falling to the ground twice in a row, Dai Qing's body was no longer as nimble as before. It was impossible for him to stand up in a short time. Taking advantage of this time, the 4 action team members who were repelled by him before pounced on Dai Qing, who was on the ground, like fierce tigers. Soon, his limbs were pressed firmly, and he could no longer move. At this time, the other 2 action team members in the bedroom had already escorted Yao Shi, who was also naked, out. Looking at the performance of the 2 men, Ning Gang, who was still calm and agile just now, couldn't help but stare blankly. Then, he shook his head. At this moment, he already knew what had happened. He couldn't help but feel nauseous. The arrest operation was very smooth. Under the surprise attack, the action team of the Security Bureau suddenly made a move and ended everything in just 2 hours. 13 of the 27 embroidered uniform guards were killed on the spot, 7 were seriously injured, and the other 7 were captured. In the dungeon of the Security Bureau's branch in the 3 eastern provinces, the interrogation had already begun. As the protagonist, Dai Qing was locked up alone in a room. At this time, his eyes were dull. Even now, he still couldn't figure out what the problem was. He didn't suspect Yi Ligang. He had already done his research. He was a man of honor and would never betray him and put Song Quan's family in danger. About an hour passed, and finally, there was a sound outside the prison door. Ning Gang and the others appeared in front of him. The 5 captured embroidered uniform guards were tortured and all of them spoke. However, they didn't know what this person wanted to do. They only knew that it was to complete a secret mission. As for the specific details, they didn't know at all. Therefore, even though they wanted to speak and even talked about many secrets of the embroidered uniform guards, none of them were related to this operation. The final mission still fell on Dai Qing's head. As soon as Ning Gang appeared, Dai Qing raised his head and looked at him with the help of the candlelight. Then, he let out a snort and turned his head to the side. He knew very well that the people outside didn't know about the mission at all. Even Yao Shi had only informed the other party that they were going to take action. They only knew about the general mission and it didn't matter. Seeing Dai Qing's uncooperative behavior, Ning Gang wasn't anxious. On the contrary, he looked at him with interest. Then, he chuckled and said, "You don't want to talk, right? It's fine. I hope you can hold on. If you want to kill me, then kill me. I'll still be a good man after 18 years. At this moment, Dai Qing showed a fearless expression. Oh. Still a good man after 18 years? Not bad. But I don't know if you can hold on until then to bring him here. Ning Gang wasn't surprised. If the other party spoke after a simple inquiry, it could only mean that there was no one else in the embroidered uniform guards that could be used. After this shout, the bare-chested Yao Shi was quickly brought over. Then, he was tied to a wooden pillar at the side. When this scene fell into Dai Qing's eyes, a trace of nervousness flashed across his face. And all of this was seen by Ning Gang. This was his trump card. He had already guessed before. Then, he found out from the mouths of the other embroidered uniform guards that Dai Qing and Yao Shi were indeed doing something shameful. He wasn't afraid of the enemy being stubborn. He was only afraid that he couldn't find the enemy's weakness. As long as he found it, it would be time to pry open the enemy's mouth. Yao Shi was tied to the wooden frame. Ning Gang casually sat on a chair. First, he inadvertently glanced at Dai Qing and found that he was looking at Yao Shi with red eyes. Immediately, the corner of his mouth curled up and said, "What are you waiting for? Let's start the torture." No. No. 2 consecutive voices came from different mouths. It was Dai Qing and Yao Shi. Yao Shi was afraid, and Dai Qing was worried. Ning Gang wasn't surprised at all by these 2 people's reactions. He looked at Yao Shi again and said, "You're so delicate. We really don't want to torture you, but there's no other way. Someone has to speak. Why are you here? Otherwise, I won't be able to report back. Okay, let's not talk nonsense. Let's start the torture." No. Yao Shi, who was afraid of being tortured, immediately shouted loudly. Then, he looked at Dai Qing and said, "Save me, save me. Didn't you say that you love me very much and are willing to give up everything for me?" If these words were said by a woman to a man, everyone would be able to accept it. After all, love between a man and a woman was a very normal thing. But when it came from a man talking to another man, no matter how handsome the man was, it made people feel a sense of disgust. At this moment, not to mention Ning Gang, even the other people participating in the interrogation hurriedly looked to the side. Obviously, they couldn't accept the reality in front of them. However, at this moment, Dai Qing didn't feel uncomfortable at all. On the contrary, he looked at Yao Shi affectionately with a look of struggle in his eyes. Next, Yao Shi shouted loudly, but Dai Qing didn't speak. He just looked conflicted and reluctant. It's time to add fuel to the fire. Ning Gang thought so in his heart. Then, he said to the torture staff, "What are you waiting for? Since there are people who don't care, let's start the torture." "Yes." A burly man agreed. Then, he raised his right hand and twisted the whip in his hand. When he saw that the whip was about to fall, Dai Qing, who had been silent, couldn't help but shout, "Don't hit, I'll talk, hit the snake where it hurts." However, no one would have thought that Dai Qing's weakness was actually a man. For the sake of Yao Shi, he finally lowered his head. Ninggang also stood up from his chair and said with satisfaction, "That's right. Well, tell me about your mission here." Dai Qing, who had been wronged, naturally cooperated fully. He told the whole story of how he received the order from eunuch Gao Rang to persuade Yi Ligang to rebel. It turned out that what happened in Liaodu had made the acting emperor very angry. If they had only lost to the 5-star army in the war, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, who would only win and not lose in a war? However, he was angry about the performance of the officials, especially the generals, who were originally from New Ergon. Didn't they say that martial artists valued righteousness and scholars despised each other? But why did so many generals and commanders choose to surrender? He couldn't figure it out. At the same time, he decided to punish these people. Otherwise, wouldn't everyone follow suit in the future? Chapter 1280. Not long after, Shi Wanshan's tens of thousands of soldiers surrendered to the 5-star army, Dai Zong became even more determined. Under the instigation of eunuch Ji Ning, this task fell into the hands of the head of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Gao Rang. Don't think that the group of eunuchs would be united. On the contrary, they fought fiercely more than anyone else. Perhaps it was because they were missing some parts of their bodies, but they were especially fierce when they fought. They would often kill their opponents as soon as they made a move. After Gao Rang received this task, he immediately began to plan everything. He needed to report to the emperor. Otherwise, if the emperor questioned him, Ji Ning would add fuel to the fire and he would not have a good ending. Just like that, after a series of investigations, the final target was Yi Ligang, who valued friendship the most. Although he wanted to make a move on Shi Wanshan, who had more power, he had already taken away his family and his brother's family. Even the eunuch who was in charge of supervising them was taken away. Helpless, he could only find General Yi Ligang, who was second only to them. Although Yi Ligang did not have a family and his parents were no longer alive, based on the results of Gao Rang's investigation, he valued friendship. He especially treated his superior, Song Quan, like his own brother. Although Song Quan was dead, his family was in Baiming's capital, so there was no need to fear that he would not submit. Thus, Gao Rang had people take Song Quan's family into custody and then sent one of his trusted aides, Dai Qing, to complete the task. In his view, with hostages in hand, Yi Ligang would not dare to act rashly. As long as he could convince him to take back the military power of the 3 eastern provinces, Baiming would not only be able to take back the area north of Liaodong, but also cut off the supply route of the 5-star army. No matter how he looked at it, this was a great achievement. Dai Qing came. He also believed that with hostages in hand, Yi Ligang would not dare to act rashly. Thus, he also brought his favorite, Yao Shi, along with him. He never thought that he would have a bad start and attract the attention of the Security Bureau of the 5-star army. Now that he had fallen into their hands, he did not know whether he would live or die. After confessing everything, Dai Qing was like a defeated rooster. He looked at Ninggang and said, "I've said what I should say. You can kill me, but please let Yao Shi go." "Thank you." Ninggang had a guess about what had happened, and now it seemed that he was right. However, he did not intend to let Dai Qing go, nor did he intend to kill him. If the matter was not resolved, Gao Rang would inevitably send other brocade guards to solve his problem. This time, it was due to the other party's carelessness that he was easily discovered. But what about the next time? What about the next time? He couldn't be so lucky every time, right? In order to solve this problem once and for all, there was only one way, which was to rescue Song Quan's family and send them to General Yi Ligang. This was the perfect ending. In order to accomplish all of this, it ultimately fell on Dai Qing's shoulders. In the capital of Biming, the security bureau also had secret armed forces, and there were spies in some key departments. It was not difficult to rescue a few people, but the difficult part was where Song Quan's family was. In the huge capital, there were more than 1 million people. If there were no clues, it would be quite difficult to find them. If they were not careful, they might alert the enemy and mess things up. In order to find out where the people were being held, they could only start from Dai Qing. Dai Tongji, do you know where Song Quan's family is being held? Ning Gang, who wanted to find out all of this, asked. Don't call me Tongji. Just call me by my name. I'm now a prisoner. As for where they are being held, I don't know. I just received a mission to inform General Yi Ligang. Dai Qing shook his head and said all of this, as expected. Ning Gang did not suspect that Dai Qing was lying. After all, he had said what he should, and there was nothing to hide. In other words, if he wanted to know where Song Quan's family was being held, he had to think of another way. However, Ning Gang did not want to go through so much trouble. He stared at Dai Qing and said, if I let you go, do you have the confidence to find where Song Quan's family is being held when you return to the capital? Hearing that he could be released, Dai Qing's heart skipped a beat. However, when he thought about how he had answered so many questions, even if he escaped now, eunuch Gao Rang and the embroidered uniform guards would not spare him. Their family rules were very strict. I don't have confidence. The capital is too big. Finding a few people, especially a few people who are deliberately hiding, is harder than ascending to the heavens. Then what if this is General Ye's intention? Ning Gang continued to ask. General Ye's intention? Dai Qing said with some confusion. Yes, it's General Ye's intention. If General Yi wants to see Song Quan's family first to make sure they are fine, then he will talk to you about surrendering. With such an excuse, do you have the confidence to see Song Quan's family? Ning Gang's brain worked quickly, and he quickly thought of a way to solve the problem and a possibility. This. Dai Qing thought about these words and imagined the possibilities, but in the end, he shook his head and said, I'm afraid it's still very difficult. I may be able to see one person, but I won't see everyone. Moreover, eunuch Gao is suspicious by nature. He won't let me see the Song family's hiding place casually. Speaking of which, I'm just one of his trusted aides, not his confidant. Dai Qing's meaning was very obvious. That was, Gao Rang still couldn't fully trust him. He wouldn't reveal all his cards in such a matter. Ning Gang did not expect this, but it was normal. If he really was a trusted subordinate, he wouldn't have sent Dai Qing to handle such a dangerous matter. After thinking it through, he was not discouraged. Instead, he continued to ask, based on your understanding of Gao Rang, which confidant might know where Song Quan's family is being held? This. After thinking for a while, Dai Qing listed 3 names and said, the 3 of them are eunuch Gao's absolute confidants. He can't do this kind of thing himself. He will only give it to one of them. As for who it will be, I can't say for sure. That's enough. Hearing that he could narrow down the target to 3 people, Ning Gang's face lit up. Originally, Yang Chendong had asked about the placement of Song Quan's family. However, Biming's capital was not within Yang Xie's sphere of influence. It was not possible to find out among millions of people with great fanfare, so this matter had been suppressed. But now that there was a clue, Ning Gang would not give up. As long as he kept a close eye on these 3 people, he would not have to worry about not being able to find them. The only way to solve this problem was to bring all of Song Quan's family members to Yi Ligang's side. A rough plan quickly formed in Ning Gang's mind. When he looked at Dai Qing, he said bluntly, Dai Qing, your chance to perform a meritorious deed has come. As long as you follow my arrangements, I will not only guarantee your safety when you return to the capital, but you will also receive a reward when you complete the mission. When the time comes, you and Yao Shi can go wherever you want. The world is vast, but all is imperial land. Hearing this, Dai Qing shook his head. He thought that this was completely bewitching words. But before he could refuse, Ning Gang interrupted, "Wrong. In the world, Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory is not smaller than Baiming's. In fact, it is even larger than Baiming's territory. As long as you complete this mission, I can immediately give you and Yaoshi an identity card that belongs to Yang Xie. When the time comes, as long as you are in Yang Xie's territory, you can go wherever you want. At that time, you can live a carefree and unfettered life with a concealed identity. Wouldn't that be better? Of course, if you are still willing to work for Bugnam of Gojoseon, I am also willing to recommend you." Dai Qing, who originally did not have much hope and only wanted to use everything he had in exchange for Yaoshi's safety, suddenly trembled when he heard these words. That's right. Right now, the world was not just Baiming's territory. There was also Nanming and Yang Xie. The territory that Yang Xie had conquered over the years was simply unimaginable. There were so many places that he could choose to live in. When the time came, no matter how powerful the embroidered uniform guard was, it would not be easy for them to find him. As for working for Yang Xie, Dai Qing did not have such thoughts. Ever since the day he joined the embroidered uniform guard, he thought that he would never be able to leave. Over the years, he had killed countless people and was tired of this kind of life. Now that he had a new beginning, how could he return to this kind of life? Okay, I only hope that after this matter is completed, you can let me and Yaoshi leave and let us go to a new place to start anew. Dai Qing did not dare to hope for a reward. As long as he could keep his life, he was already very satisfied. Although he did not manage to persuade Dai Qing to join the security bureau, Ning Gang was not disappointed. As Yang Xie grew stronger and his territory became wider and wider, there would be plenty of talents in the future. At that time, it would not be you who begged others to join, but others who begged you to join. Finally, Dai Qing was persuaded. But for the sake of safety, Yaoshi did not leave with him this time. Only he was allowed to leave the Jianghu left guard. Later, after the secret agents of the security bureau in Baiming and Jingming received the telegram, they kept an eye on Gao Rang's 3 confidants and made preparations. In the end, they found all of Song Quan's family members. What happened next was much simpler. The people were suddenly taken away by the security bureau. Then they left the capital through a secret channel and went to Shur City. In April next year, they arrived at the Jianghu left guard. When they suddenly appeared in the Yi mansion, Yi Ligang was completely shocked. Originally, he had been waiting for Dai Qing to show up again. He had already thought that as long as Dai Qing dared to appear again, he would take him down and send him to the governor, Lu Ji, to prove his loyalty to Bugnam of Gojoseon and the 5-star army. Next, he would commit suicide to thank Song Quan for taking care of him. But he did not expect that after waiting for so long, he would get such a result. Chapter 1281. The person was sent over, and Yi Ligang had to be interrogated according to the law. After all, he didn't report Dai Qing's appearance to Governor Lu Ji and the relevant departments. Who knew what he was thinking? However, after the investigation, Yi Ligang's bodyguards found out that the general had ordered that the moment Baiming's brocade guard appeared, it would be time to arrest them. This proved his loyalty. After reporting to Yang Chendong, Yi Ligang was released without charge and returned to his position as the general of the eastern 3 provinces. As for Dai Qing, he completed his mission very well and brought over a member of the Song family. Ning Gang also fulfilled his promise. Not only did he release Yaoshi, but he also gave them identification documents that could be used in Yang Xie's territory. He also gave them 10,000 taels of silver for their living expenses. This was enough for them to live a carefree life. Dai Qing was so touched that he knelt down to thank him. He also said that he would tell his brothers about what had happened to him through various channels. In the brocade guard, everyone knew that as long as they came, they would be part of the brocade guard in life and in death. It was impossible for them to leave. However, with him as an example, those who wanted to leave could first come to Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory and then leave. This was equivalent to giving the brocade guard, especially those who were no longer part of the brocade guard, a new way out. Because of this, who knew how many brocade guard left and how many secrets they took with them? Some of these people directly joined the security bureau to work for Yang Chendong, while others joined the army and started anew. There were also some who went to other places to become farmers or merchants. However, this matter had a great impact on the brocade guard. Not only did it not succeed, but it also caused their own troops to be disloyal. Gao Rang was often punished by the acting guardian emperor. This matter was enough to change the entire brocade guard, but it wasn't important in front of Yang Chendong. It was already the 3rd month, and the snow had begun to melt. Although the weather was still fluctuating, and occasionally there would be light snow or sleet, it was no longer a hindrance to the road. Yang Chendong was also going to lead the 5-star army to attack and occupy the Lili area. Over the past few months, hundreds of grain piles had been built in Turpan. They were all filled with rations to ensure that the army had enough for war. Many of the warehouses in the palace were also filled with boxes of gold, silver, and paper money. It had been 2 years since the banknotes were issued. This paper called Han banknote had a very obvious golden dragon printed on it, making it unforgettable. In Yang Xie's sphere of influence, these silver coins had gradually replaced gold ingots, silver ingots, and copper coins. After all, these things would be worn out if used frequently, but Han coins would not. As long as there was no intentional damage or tearing, it would not be wasted. Especially when there were different denominations in the banknotes. The small ones were 1 fun, 2 fun, and 5 fun, while the large ones were 100, 50, and 20 yuan. They were light and easy to carry, and were much more convenient than silver. With the Yang family bank as a guarantor, one could bring Han coins to any bank to exchange for gold and silver. At the same time, one could exchange gold and silver for Han coins. It was extremely convenient. If it was a large transaction, the Yang family bank could also release 100,000 yuan worth of banknotes. In this way, it was convenient for the commoners, and at the same time, it gradually replaced gold, silver, and copper coins, relieving the pressure on Yang Xie's finances. Even though Yang Xie was using war to support war, due to the continuous war, the pressure on his finances was still huge. If it wasn't for the fact that there were many new products that were exported, earning large amounts of money, he would not have been able to support himself until now. Furthermore, the circulation of Han banknotes had reduced the risks that might arise. Currently, all the banks in the Yang family were filled with gold and silver, greatly increasing the commoners' confidence in Han coins. With money and rations, this war was much easier to fight. Furthermore, Yang Chendong had the strongest weapons in the world, as well as the most resolute army. It was only a matter of time before they swept through all 4 directions. Just like now, the 5-star army seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. They were just waiting for Wu Nanking's order to launch a large-scale attack, besieging the city and capturing the stronghold to gain military merits. In comparison, the Ili Beli, Turpan, and Yarkiang tribes were having a much harder time. The commoners knew that war was coming, and no one knew what would happen. In a short period of time, the price of food soared, especially the price of food, which the commoners relied on for survival. In the past, 1 tael of silver could buy 2 dan of rice, and 1 dan was 94 kilograms. 1 tael of silver could buy 188 kilograms of rice. But now, 1 tael of silver could only buy 10 kilograms of rice. The price of food remained high, and at the beginning of spring, there were already signs of people starving to death. The flow of people fleeing also increased. In this regard, the kings of the 3 kingdoms could only watch, because they didn't know how long this war would last. They absolutely couldn't take out the food in their storehouses. Otherwise, how could the army win the war without food? What was worse was that the Kazakh and Aries dynasties' armies were about to enter. According to the previous agreement, the 3 kingdoms would be responsible for their food supplies. For a moment, the 3 kings were worried sick. The commoners were so hungry that they could not even eat, nor could they afford to buy food. Where would they find the strength to grow food? This was like a vicious cycle. Before the war even started, there were already internal problems, and the economic order was seriously threatened. It was said that war was a matter of fighting for money. Before the war even started, the 5-star army had already won. When the news of the three kingdoms reached the ears of Yang Chendong in Turpan, he keenly felt that this was a great opportunity. He immediately sent a telegram to the logistics headquarters, Yangtze, and asked him to gather more food and send it to Turpan. At the same time, he ordered the gates to be opened to receive the refugees from all directions. He also said that if the commoners had money, they could use the previous price to buy food. If they did not have money, as long as they came here, they would not be allowed to starve to death. If they were willing to move to other places, they would be given a pass. After gathering enough people, they could be sent to the rear and be given food, money, and land. With this move, the south and west gates of Turpan were quickly filled with commoners from all over. They were all people living at the bottom of the food chain, and did not have much savings. When the harvest was good, they could eat more, but when the harvest was bad, their food would be worse. People like these only wanted to survive. As for beliefs and dignity, who would care if they could not even eat? The sudden situation also caught Yang Chendong off guard. Originally, he thought that even if he opened the city gate and spread the food, he might not be able to recruit many people. However, when he saw the number of people increasing by thousands or even tens of thousands every day, and this trend was getting stronger and stronger, he couldn't help but smile bitterly and say, "Immediately transfer 2 divisions from the new Second Army to escort the food and be responsible for the safety of the people along the way. Quickly send these people to the rear." This sudden development caught Yang Chendong off guard, but the military operations that were supposed to be carried out did not stop. For example, the new army, the new Fifth Army, and the First Army of the foreign races still set off on time. Before the 3 commanders left the city, Yang Chendong held a short meeting and gave them a clear request. Their task was not to occupy as many cities as possible, but to attack the enemy's military strength as much as possible. Don't even think about occupying the cities. That's not something you should do. Unless there's a shortage of food, you can open the warehouses to get food. At other times, you can even abandon the captives and military equipment. In short, there's only one thing: kill the enemy. The more you kill, the better. After the 3 commanders completely understood Yang Chendong's meaning, they immediately expressed that they would kill as many enemies as possible to pave the way for the Central Army. The 3 commanders quickly left after giving a standard military salute to Yang Chendong, and then more than 100,000 troops poured out of the city. Naturally, the people of the 3 kingdoms were worried when they heard the news, especially King Hardenbarter. After hearing the news, his face was full of worry, and there was no light in it. Unlike the other 2 kingdoms, King Hardenbarter lost his capital and fled all the way until he lost his strength. But because of the bumpy road, coupled with the lack of strength in the front line, and the repeated defeats, when the news came, the imprisoned King Shiza fell ill and finally died 10 days ago. Before King Shiza died, he scolded his son Hardenbarter for being unfilial, which made him very angry. What he did was for the good of Turpan, but he didn't expect the 5-star army to be so strong. They didn't retreat in the face of the 5-kingdom alliance, and they even won consecutive battles. In the end, the famous Yes Hen had no choice but to flee. Now that they were finally enlightened, and it was time for war, the 5-star army's first target seemed to be him. There was nothing he could do about it. Who told Kalibi to be the closest to Turpan? After knowing that the 5-star army first sent out more than 100,000 troops, and that one of the new army's targets was Kalibi, Hardenbarter called General Daichin to discuss the defense. The Kazakh and Aries dynasties' armies haven't arrived yet, and Yeshen and Erqiang have a large area to defend. What should we do now? After calling Daichin, Hardenbarter immediately asked for a plan, and at the same time, he showed an expectant expression. If it was before, he wouldn't have to worry about this at all, and would just wait for the other party to report. But after a few battles, Turpan didn't win a single time, and even General Daichin lost a battle. As a general who lost his capital, Hardenbarter didn't have much confidence in them. Chapter 1282. Now that Tulyifan had suffered consecutive defeats, their military strength was not as good as before. Although they recruited another 50,000 soldiers, their military strength had reached 180,000, but there were too many places to defend. Facing the 5-star army, they were unable to do anything. More importantly, the civilians of Tulyifan were too close to Tulyifan city. Naturally, they were the majority of the civilians that escaped. Not only that, there were also a lot of retired soldiers that escaped. They mixed in with the civilians and entered Tulyifan city. Don't think that they mixed in just to find the base of the 5-star army. They really did surrender. Their families didn't have food to eat, their parents were old, their children were young, their wives were weak. They all needed the head of the family as a man to take care of them. These people chose to stand out to protect their families and join the 5-star army with their families. People like these who brought their families with them wouldn't go against the 5-star army, much less cause any trouble. Moreover, this situation was becoming more and more intense. The battle had yet to begin, but the army had already lost close to 5,000 soldiers. One could imagine, with their current state, how could they fight with the 5-star army? How could they fight with the enemy? They didn't have enough soldiers and their battle strength was even lower. Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice. At this moment, General Dai Qin didn't know how to deal with this. At this moment, he really wanted to ask the king to open the granary and release the grain. However, he knew that if he really did that, not only would the civilians of Tulyifan, even the civilians of Ili and Yirqiang would come. It would also attract some unscrupulous merchants who would hoard grain at a high price. If that happened, then it would be a huge problem. Dai Qin thought for a long time but couldn't think of a solution. Facing the king's question, he could only lower his head and remain silent. Harden Bartle waited for a long while and still didn't get any reply. He couldn't help but ask, General Dai Qin, I'm asking you something. Can you hear me? Yes, Your Majesty, I hear you. The 5-star army is coming at us ferociously, our reinforcements won't be able to reach here in a short amount of time. The only thing we can do now is to place our main forces outside the city and defend first. Using our advantage in numbers and terrain, we can still fight. Helpless, Dai Qin could only suggest a defensive strategy. He knew that if they kept defending, they would definitely lose. However, if they took the initiative to fight, they might be surrounded and split up. If that really happened, Turpan would have no trump cards left. Even if they could chase away the 5-star army one day, they wouldn't have the strength to bargain with their allies. Harden Barter quickly understood what Dai Qin meant. He couldn't help but frown. You mean that we should let the 5-star army walk past our city and wreak havoc everywhere? But do you know that if we do that, the entire Turpan will be engulfed in the flames of war, and we will have no way out. Once the city is lost, there will be no place for us to stay. Dai Qin obviously understood this logic, but at this moment, he really didn't have any better ideas. If they split up their forces to fight, they would probably lose even faster. As for whether or not this would cause them to lose the nearby cities and large amounts of land, it wasn't a problem that he needed to consider right now. Let's solve this problem first. Your Majesty, I know your worries, but as long as Your Majesty is still here, the army is still here, and the lost land can be taken back. Furthermore, from what I see, if we gather our forces outside the city, the 5-star army might turn around and leave. After all, their numbers aren't as good as ours, so attacking the city won't benefit them. That way, as long as they leave, they might enter the lands of other allies. If that happens, some people won't be able to stand by and do nothing. Dai Qin had done a serious analysis before. Right now, there were 150,000 soldiers gathered outside the city, and their numbers were above the 5-star armies. If they attacked this place, both sides would suffer losses, and this wasn't the result that the 5-star army wanted. It was very likely that they would give up on this place and go to other places, such as Yilabali and Yarqiang. In that case, the two allied countries would not be able to sit on the sidelines even if they wanted to. Once they joined in, the pressure on Tulyifan would be greatly reduced. When Harden Barter heard these words, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He finally understood his general's thoughts. This was also what he wanted. A month ago, before the ice and snow had melted, he had contacted the kings of Yilabali and Yarkiang, hoping that they would send reinforcements. This was because from various signs, it was very likely that the five-star army's first target would be his Turpan kingdom. What he meant was that he didn't receive any response from them, as if they didn't hear his suggestion at all. It was clear that the two countries wanted to see them fight the five-star army first, and then find a chance to reap the benefits. This was the so-called alliance. Because of the existence of their own interests, it was impossible for them to truly be united. Once there was a conflict of interests, it was very likely that they would turn against each other. Since they weren't benevolent, then they shouldn't blame him for being unrighteous. Although Daiqin's suggestion was to sacrifice a large portion of Turpan cities, he would be able to preserve his own military strength and quickly drag the other two countries into the war to reduce the pressure on him. Why not? The most important question now was whether or not the five-star army would attack Kalabali city. He asked Daiqin this question again, "Are you sure that the five-star army will go around us?" They should. Even though this was the result of many analyses, who could be sure about the changes on the battlefield? Daiqin didn't dare to make any guarantees, so he added, "Your Majesty, we can act like we are going to fight to the death and give the five-star army some pressure. This way, they shouldn't attack us. Plus, if they really want to attack Kalabali city, then we can hold on for a while. When the time comes, we will have enough time to send your Majesty away." Daiqin's meaning was very clear. No matter what, Hardenbarter's life could be saved. The only difference was that one result was that they would still be very strong, and the other result was that they would become a fugitive government that needed to rely on others. Okay, then let's give it a try. Immediately transfer the troops from the nearby cities and leave some money and food in the other cities to lure the five-star army. Hardenbarter was very decisive. He actually didn't have any other choice. Either he immediately moved the army and gave up on Kalabali city. This way, even if he continued to escape, he would still be caught by the five-star army. The losses wouldn't be small. Since that was the case, why not take a gamble? Daiqin was very supportive of Hardenbarter's decision. When he heard that the king wanted the other cities to leave some food for the five-star army, he couldn't help but reveal a look of admiration. With this bait, the chances of the five-star army not attacking Kalabali city would increase. Under the king's orders, the troops from the nearby city started to move towards Kalabali city. The Turpan kingdom only had 180,000 troops. Other than the 30,000 troops that were too scattered and couldn't gather due to the distance, the other 150,000 troops were all gathered in and outside Kalabali city. The military tent stretched for 10 miles, as if they were ready for a decisive battle once the five-star army arrived. The ones that came from the middle were the new army. After General Su heard the information from the scouts, mainly from the intelligence department, he immediately made the decision to go around Kalabali city and attack the smaller cities with weaker defenses. Before they came, Yang Chendong had said that this time, they weren't going to take over the city or see who took over the most territory. What they wanted was to destroy the enemy's strength. Since that was the case, Suhi wouldn't be stupid enough to fight with the Turpan kingdom's main force. Plus, he really didn't care about a single Kalabali city. Suhi's new army was the closest five-star army to Kalabali city. Even he suddenly took a detour, so the five-star army and the first army of the other races definitely wouldn't have any ideas about this place. When the news reached Hardenbarter and Daiqin's ears, they couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. King Hardenbarter's face finally showed a trace of relief as he said, "They really took a detour. Let the other people have a headache from now on." "Yes, Your Majesty. Now that we've prepared ahead of time, we've stored large amounts of food in Kalabali city. It won't be a problem for us to defend for 2 to 3 years. By then, the battle will have ended. At that time, with your 150,000 troops, you might become the strongest force here." Daiqin also let out a sigh of relief. As the general, the pressure on him was greater than anyone else. Luckily, the result was good. The 5-star army really did take a detour. Naturally, the burden on his body was also reduced by a bit. Oh. You're saying that we still have a chance? Hardenbarter, who originally thought that they were just hiding for a while, suddenly thought of a possibility. If the result was as Dai Qin predicted, when the 5-star army and his allies were almost done fighting, wouldn't he be able to reap the greatest benefits by leading his 150,000 troops? Thinking about how the Turpan kingdom could use this opportunity to increase their strength and truly unify this place, Hardenbarter couldn't help but laugh out loud. Wasn't this what he had been searching for? Perhaps it would truly be realized in his own hands. The new army went around Kalabali city and came to the hinterland of the Turpan kingdom. Then, they attacked the city and took over the stronghold. No one could stop them. Some of the smaller cities had already opened their gates. The civilians had all run away. The Turpan army in the city had also all run away. It didn't take much effort at all. Chapter 1283. Regarding this, Commander Su he was extremely clear-headed. Even though he was facing an empty city, he still sent people to investigate and only moved in after confirming that it was safe. After a night of rest, he did not leave a single soldier in the city the next morning. Instead, he continued to lead the army forward. He remembered Yang Chendong's order, which was to destroy the enemy's strength and not to snatch control of the city. Along the way, the advance of the 1st Cavalry had been incredibly fast. Along the way, they had encountered some resistance from the Turfan army, but most of them were only a few hundred to 1,000 men. In front of the powerful 1st Cavalry, which numbered over 30,000, a single regiment could easily crush them in a single charge, wiping them out in just a few rounds. The new army progressed at an extremely fast pace, and good news was reported through the radio from time to time. In comparison, the progress of the new 5 armies could be said to be extremely fast. This was because they had originally chosen the east route. After setting off from Turpan, they also went around Chali and headed straight for Lop Nur. After taking down the nearby Ruoqiang County, their journey was extremely smooth. After some rest, they headed straight for Yirqiang's tribe. Next, it was time for them to show off their strength. In comparison, the 1st army of the outsiders was not so lucky. Under the lead of Commander Bai Shuang, they headed straight for Heavenly Mountain. Once they crossed the mountain, it would be equivalent to entering the hinterland of Ili and fighting with them. Luckily, they were prepared beforehand and had already scouted out their route. They found a relatively flat land, so crossing Heavenly Mountain was only a matter of time. Seeing that they were about to succeed and were about to face the city, Bai Shuang stopped the army and summoned the 4 division commanders to his tent. Inside the tent, Bai Shuang was wearing a purple cape. His young and handsome face had a maturity and steadiness that did not belong to his age. His clear eyes were staring at the sand table gathered by the intelligence department in front of him, thinking about something. Commander. Tu Hai and the other division commanders walked into the tent. After seeing Bai Shuang, they could not help but call out. Bai Shuang had replaced Su Kuda as the commander of the 1st Army of the Outsiders. For a regiment commander to be promoted to the position of commander, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was being promoted beyond his rank. But who asked his teacher to be Yang Chendong and Bugnam of Gojoseon? Even though Tu Hai and the others did not agree in their hearts, they still had to put on a very respectful appearance on the surface. Bai Shuang could more or less guess the thoughts of the 4 teachers. However, he didn't mind because he believed that he could conquer them with his own abilities. This was also the idea that his teacher, Yang Chendong, had given him. During the new year, when Bai Shuang went to visit Yang Chendong, she had received some pointers. Seniority in the army was naturally not something that could be ignored, but ability was more important. According to what Yang Chendong had said, as long as he displayed enough strength, Tu Hai and the others would not listen to him. Of course, if they really dared to disobey military orders, they could deal with them according to military rules. On this point, Yang Chendong had fully delegated the authority to Bai Shuang. With Yang Chendong's support behind him, what did Bai Shuang have to fear? He immediately promised that he would use practical actions to prove himself, and at the same time, he would not lose face for his teacher. Next, it was time to fight the first battle. How to make the 4 teachers truly submit to him. This battle was naturally very crucial. You've all come. Very good, take a look at the sand table in front of you. In half a day, we will be able to cross the heavenly mountain. Next, we will be entering the territory of Ili. The first town in front of us is the city department of Little Yule. The intelligence personnel have already sent news that there are 2,000 enemy soldiers here. Everyone, tell us, how should we attack and occupy that place? As Bai Shuang spoke, his gaze landed on Tu Hai and the other 3. Only 2,000 enemy soldiers. The 4 teachers couldn't help but reveal a proud expression. Clearly, this amount of soldiers was nothing in their eyes. Especially the leader of the 301st Division, Tu Hai. As a veteran of countless battles, Tu Hai had already killed countless enemies. Only 2,000 people were nothing in his eyes. Therefore, he was the first to speak. Military leader, it's only 2,000 enemies. Leave this matter to our division. I guarantee that we will be able to take it down within 2 hours. Tu Hai's words were extremely confident. In reality, he also had the strength to do so. The other teachers originally wanted to ask for a battle, but since Tu Hai had already stood out, it was naturally not good for them to snatch the credit. But even though they did not say anything, from their expressions, it was obvious that they were disdainful of this battle. 2 hours? Not bad, it is indeed very fast. After Bai Shuang heard Tu Hai's words, he nodded in approval. He. Hearing that Bai Shuang seemed to agree, Tu Hai laughed and immediately saluted. Military leader, I will go and make preparations. At this time tomorrow, I will guarantee that the army will be able to spend the night in Little Yule City C. After speaking, Tu Hai was about to turn and leave the tent, but Bai Shuang's voice rang out, Teacher Tu, please wait. Tu Hai, who was stopped, revealed a displeased expression. However, before he could say anything, Bai Shuang and the others also asked, Division Master Tu, how many men are you going to bring to attack? Can you guarantee that the other party will all stay in the city? Can you guarantee that none of the civilians or soldiers will escape? Can you guarantee that the news of our army appearing here will not be leaked? Can you guarantee that the stored food in the city will be safe for our army to use? Can you guarantee that? A series of questions were thrown out. In this short period of time, Tu Hai's expression changed again and again. He really wanted to say that once the battle started, who knew what would happen? How could he guarantee this? Who could guarantee this? After a series of questions were thrown out, Tu Hai did not know how to answer. However, Bai Shuang did not intend to stop asking. Instead, he continued to ask, I wonder if Teacher Tu can give an answer to these questions? This, I can't guarantee. Tu Hai opened his mouth and closed it. After closing it and opening it again, he finally said these words. Okay, then which of the other teachers can do it? Bai Shuang then looked at Luan Xiaojiang and the others with a serious expression. No. Luan Xiaojiang, Sensei Naganabu, and Kong Biyao all shook their heads one by one. It was easy to take down a city, but it was too difficult to not leak any news. At this moment, Tu Hai had already recovered from his previous question. At this moment, he finally said, Military leader, this is a bit too much. The situation of a battle is constantly changing. There is a saying in the art of war, there is no constant situation in war, and there is no constant situation in water. Who can guarantee that there will not be any problems? Wrong. Without waiting for Tu Hai to finish, Bai Shuang's stern gaze had already turned over. Changes in war do exist, but as long as the plan is good, it is very possible to control it within a certain range. Also, if you can't do it, it doesn't mean that others can't. I am willing to make a military pledge. I will personally go and control Little Yule City head. I guarantee that there will not be any problems. However, if there are any accidents, I am willing to resign from my current position and return to being a regiment commander. When the military pledge was made, the 4 teachers were so shocked that their jaws dropped. For a moment, they were all stunned and did not know what to say. Logically speaking, with Bai Shuang's current status, he could let his subordinates do things for him. Unless it was a matter of life and death for the First Army, he would not personally take action. This was also Yang Chendong's intention. High-ranking officers could not take risks, because if something happened, the losses would be too great. However, Bai Shuang actually took the initiative to volunteer. However, to be able to become a teacher, none of them were idiots. They quickly thought it through. This time, Bai Shuang was forcing himself. He was establishing his authority. Military commander, you can't. After thinking it through, Division 303's division commander Sensei Naganabu took the initiative to stand up, wanting to say something. He was different from other people. Although he led the First Army, it was an army made up of people from different races, different regions, and even different faiths. However, to be able to become a high-ranking officer, other than him, everyone else was Han. This made his status somewhat awkward. When he did some things, he naturally could not be as unscrupulous as other people. Now that Bai Shuang was about to take the risk, of course he had to speak up to stop him and express his attitude. Sensei Naganabu was the first to speak up. Afterwards, Division 302's division commander Wan Xiaojiang and Division 304's division commander Kong Biyao also spoke up to dissuade him. Whether they were sincere or just on the surface, at least they all knew that Bai Shuang's appointment as a military commander was personally ordered by Yang Chendong. That was set in stone and no one could stop him. And if something happened to Bai Shuang in front of them, as the commanders who held the military power, they would not be any better off. Out of the 4 commanders, 3 of them had expressed their opinions. Only Tu Hai stood there without saying anything. Instead, he looked at Bai Shuang up and down as if he had just met him. All right, this military commander has made up his mind. It cannot be changed. How about this? I will bring the direct military guards to Little Yule City Head. You all just need to stay at home and wait for the good news. Bai Shuang did not care if others looked at him or not. As the saying went, doing things beautifully was more convincing than saying more. Orders, everyone is to rest where they are. The direct military guards will follow me. Bai Shuang gave the order as a military commander. At this moment, even if the 4 commanders wanted to say something, it was all too late. In the 5-star army, the military commander's authority was still very great. Unless it involved a rebellion, the officers under him had to obey him unconditionally. Otherwise, they would be punished according to military law. Bai Shuang left. He left very decisively, and indeed only brought the 2,000 soldiers of the direct military guards with him. However, others did not know that he did not intend to use all of the 2,000 soldiers. He only needed to bring a battalion into the city. The other 4 battalions were only responsible for keeping watch outside, just in case. Chapter 1284. In the mountains 4 li away from Little Yule City, Bai Shuang was leading the 1st Guard Battalion to change. He took out a large amount of commoner clothing from the military luggage and put it on. As he fastened the buttons on his robe, Bai Shuang said to the large man standing beside him, Commander Zhuang, I'll leave everything outside to you. If nothing goes wrong, I'll send you a signal at night. When the time comes, you must act quickly, quickly. Commander Zhuang's full name was Zhuang Cheng. He was originally a deputy battalion commander of the 4th Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division. This time, Bai Shuang came to the First Army. As a trusted aide, his status naturally rose, and he was promoted to Guard Battalion Commander. Zhuang Cheng's face was solemn, and his eyes were filled with concern. Hearing this, he immediately stood at attention. Commander, I'll remember. Very good, Battalion Commander Xiao, let's go. Bai Shuang had just finished changing his clothes. He glanced at the dozens of men behind him who had also changed their clothes. With a chuckle, he walked towards the nearby official road and headed towards the direction of Little Yule City. Battalion Commander Xiao Qing was originally a company commander of the 4th Regiment. He usually admired Bai Shuang's ability. This time, he took the initiative to come along, and obtained the position of guard battalion commander. Bai Shuang and the dozens of men walked on the official road. Little Yule City was already in sight. Bai Shuang couldn't help but slow down, and said in a very casual tone, "The enemy has 2,000 soldiers in the city. Are you afraid?" "No." The soldiers all said in unison. To be able to go on a mission with their commander was their honor. If word got out, it would be something to gain face. Furthermore, the other brothers of the 1st Battalion had already changed into the city. They were the last batch. This way, they had a total of 400 people. Although they didn't have as many soldiers as the enemy, they still had the ability to fight back. Not to mention, if their commander could lead the troops, he definitely had a thorough plan. What was there to be afraid of? Good, that's how war is. Very satisfied with the soldiers' answers, Bai Shuang said confidently, "On the battlefield, just because you're afraid of death, you won't be killed. On the contrary, if you weren't afraid of death, others would only be afraid of you. That way, you would have more chances to protect yourself. Alright, you are all courageous and insightful people. Next, I will tell you about the next mission. As long as you are courageous and careful, the mission will not be difficult to complete." Back then, White Shuang had infiltrated and taken down Hobak Seri city without shedding a drop of blood. For that, he had been praised by Yang Chendong. This time, he had the same idea. The only difference was that he had changed his approach. This time, he was not going to hold anyone hostage. Instead, he was going to give them gifts. This could be seen from the wooden boxes carried by the burly men behind him. Little Yule City. Although it was considered a border city of Ely, because it was separated by a heavenly mountain, it was a little remote and not very lively. If it weren't for the chaos of war, where many commoners couldn't even fill their stomachs and were running around, the floating population here would be pitifully small. However, it was precisely because of this chaos that the other soldiers, disguised as refugees, did not encounter any trouble from the city guards when they entered the city. On the other hand, Bai Shuang and his group of several dozen people, dressed in bright clothes and full of vigor, quickly attracted the attention of the city guards. "Who are you people? All of you, stop for inspection." The centurion in charge of guarding the city gate had a vigilant look on his face. After all, Bai Shuang's group was too conspicuous. Especially when there was a group of refugees in ragged clothes walking by, it highlighted their different identities. With this shout, Bai Shuang took the lead and stood on the spot. Then he chuckled and said, "Brother, don't be nervous. We are here to find your general and give him a gift." After saying this, Bai Shuang intentionally turned around to look at the 2 large wooden boxes behind him with a smile on his face. Bai Shuang was a person with delicate features. When he took the initiative to express his goodwill, he could indeed give people a good impression. In addition, there were only 30 brothers behind him. This centurion had 100 people beside him. Of course, he wouldn't take it too seriously. Give him a gift? The centurion was puzzled. It wasn't that he had never seen people giving gifts before, but it was his first time seeing someone giving gifts with such fanfare. Just as he was puzzled, Bai Shuang had already walked in front of him. Then, he handed 2 silver ingots worth 10 silver taels each to the centurion. "That's right, we are here to give you a gift. I'll have to trouble you to inform the general that he will definitely reward you handsomely." 20 silver taels was not a small sum for a centurion who wasn't rich. His eyes immediately lit up. He used his hand to measure the quality of the silver. It was definitely of high quality. He immediately withdrew his ferocious expression and changed it into a smile. "All right, since that's the case, follow me. I will bring you to see the general." It was obvious that this centurion still remembered Bai Shuang's words. The general would definitely reward him handsomely. Such a good job couldn't be given to someone else. With this centurion leading the way, it was naturally not difficult to enter the city. Not only that, they quickly arrived at the general's residence. When Bai Shuang saw that most of the houses in the city were dilapidated, but the residence in front of him was majestic and dignified. How could he not know that they had arrived? As expected, the centurion stopped in his tracks and pointed at the courtyard in front of him. "This is the residence of our general, Slam. Please." "Thank you, please." Bai Shuang immediately smiled and nodded. He had a look of gratitude as he followed the centurion into the residence. The difference was that Xiao Qing and the others behind him were blocked outside the door. They were watched over by the centurion's soldiers. It could be said that they were being held captive. Bai Shuang didn't show the slightest bit of fear because his subordinates were blocked. On the contrary, he entered with a calm expression. His gaze casually swept around as if he was very interested in everything in the courtyard. However, he knew that he was scouting the enemy. The centurion led the way. He seemed to be very familiar with everything in the residence. Along the way, he didn't let anyone lead him. Even at this time, there wasn't even a housekeeper coming out to welcome him. All of this entered Bai Shuang's eyes and made him feel disdain. From this, it could be seen that the general's standards were too ordinary. The reality was as Bai Shuang expected. Under the centurion's guidance, Bai Shuang easily saw the person in charge, Slam. He was a man with a rather tall and sturdy figure, but his face was a bit pale. Based on his experience in observing people, Bai Shuang could easily tell that this Slam was someone who had been hollowed out by wine and women. This was very consistent with the information sent by the intelligence department. Although Bai Shuang appeared to be very confident along the way, if it wasn't for the fact that he continuously obtained a lot of information about General Ibali from the intelligence department while the land was covered in snow, how could he enter so fearlessly? It was only when the preparation work was done that he appeared to be so confident in doing things. According to the information provided by the intelligence department, this Slam was someone who was ostracized by the upper echelons of General Ibali, which was why he was arranged to guard such a remote small city. Bai Shuang was very confident that she could establish a relationship with these people who were depressed and unable to achieve their goals. Slam looked as if he had just woken up from a drunken stupor. When he saw that it was a centurion under his command, he yawned and pointed at Bai Shuang, who was standing there, and said, "Who is he? What is he doing here?" With the opportunity to speak, the centurion thought of the reward. He immediately leaned over with a face full of joy. He came to Slam's side and whispered for a while. Originally, Slam didn't seem to care. He thought that it was another homeless person who wanted to join the army. However, in just a short while, his eyes became brighter and brighter. In the end, before the centurion finished speaking, he had already grabbed his arm and asked with a face full of joy, "You're saying that there are 2 big chests, and that there might be silver inside?" The centurion only felt a burst of pain when Slam grabbed his arm, but he had no choice but to nod and answer, "Yes, General. I haven't seen what's inside the chests, but I think it's silver without a doubt." "Good, good, then why aren't you bringing it up?" As Slam, who was sent to a remote place, even if he wanted to deduct some silver and receive some benefits, he had nowhere to go. Recently, there were more and more refugees. For a time, there were all kinds of people. There were even many bandits passing by. As a result, the security of Little Yule City wasn't very good. Every day, there were all kinds of bad news, and he was already sick of it. Now that he heard that someone was actually giving him silver, how could he not be happy? In his excitement, he couldn't help but forget himself. The centurion also wanted to see if the chests were filled with silver, but Bai Shuang was still standing there and didn't speak. He looked down on the general's ugly expression and could only remind him softly, "General, the person is here. Shouldn't we first ask him why he's here?" Yes, he had to ask first. Who's the person below? With this reminder, Slamu finally reacted. Then, he tidied up his clothes and asked in a very serious manner. Finally, it was his turn. Bai Shuang had already prepared his speech. "General, my surname is Bai, and I'm in the grain business. You also know that in the chaos of war, the price of grain is rising again and again. Therefore, I gave up all my wealth and opened a trade route from the grasslands. As long as the general agrees, we can continuously transport grain from the north of Tian Shan Mountain. At that time, we will have to pass through the general's territory. Therefore, this time, I'm here to give the general a gift and hope that we can work together to achieve great things. What? You're in the grain business? You can transport grain from the north of the mountain? You're Han. At this moment, Slam's eyes were already wide open. He was completely shocked by Bai Shuang's words. Chapter 1285. If one were to talk about what was the most valuable right now, the first would be food. After all, people could buy less clothes, and even a piece of clothing could be worn for a long time with some mending. However, they could not go without food for a day. Otherwise, there would be problems, and even death. Especially in this war, the price of food had increased exponentially. Even though Jianghu had already received orders to stock up on food, he still felt that the granary in the city was too small. After all, no one knew how long this war would last. There was only going out and not going in. It was truly worrying. And now, someone said that they could get a large amount of food. How could he not be alarmed? The first thing he did was to ask if the other party was Han. After all, only the Han-led 5-star army would not lack food. That was why they had such a way to transport food. Regarding his identity as Han, Bai Shuang had no intention of hiding it. He did not want to hide it either. Facing Jianghu's question, he did not have any intention of denying it. He immediately nodded. General has good eyesight. This one is Han. With this admission, Jianghu's body tensed up. Their opponent, the 5-star army, was mainly Han. However, Bai Shuang's next sentence caused Slamu's tense nerves to relax a lot. I'm a Han Chinese, but not all Han Chinese are part of the 5-star army. Not all Han Chinese like to fight and are willing to fight. This one only likes to earn money. I do not understand military matters and do not want to understand. Hearing Bai Shuang say that he was not part of the 5-star army and did not like to fight. He only liked to earn money. Jianghu's expression became much better. The centurion to the side was also shocked by Bai Shuang's identity as a Han. He was not afraid that the other party would do anything to him. After all, this was Little Yule City, his territory. He was worried that the reward he was about to receive would be gone. Now that he heard such words, his heart moved. He quickly said to Jianghu, General, what he said makes sense. Not all Han people are our enemies. Besides, if he really is an enemy, why would he give you money? I'm afraid that he would have long come over with weapons. That makes sense. Living in a remote area, Sama didn't know much about the 5-star army, so he didn't think the 5-star army was that scary. The most important thing was that he also believed that this was Little Yule City, and this was his territory. There were only a few dozen people here, but he had 2,000 soldiers. If the other party dared to act rashly, he only needed to give an order to settle everything. Furthermore, he knew that if he were White Double, he definitely wouldn't have the guts to barge into the 5-star army's barracks. Judging others by his own standards, Sama's vigilance dropped a lot. When he looked at White Shuang, he focused all his attention on the grain business. What did you say your surname was? General, he said his surname is Bai, the centurion said with a flattering look. Oh, yes, Mr. Bai, right? You said that you can transport food, then may I ask where the food is? Slama resumed his high and mighty general appearance and asked Bai Shuang. He. Seeing the other party ask such an idiotic question, Bai Shuang couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then, he felt that the situation wasn't right. Seeing Slama's confused expression, he took the initiative to explain, General, this time I'm only the vanguard. I'm in charge of clearing all the checkpoints. Also, we're not very sure if there's a need for food here. Only after understanding everything will the food be transported here in large quantities. With this explanation, Slama's old face turned red. He also knew that he seemed to have asked a very stupid question. But right now, his attention wasn't on this at all. He was thinking about large quantities of food. When White Shuang finished speaking, he immediately said, lack of food. I'll take as much as you have, but I don't know the price. The price is only 30% higher than the market price. White Shuang hesitated for a moment, then tentatively raised 3 fingers, 30%. Hearing this price, Slamu seemed to have been pricked by something. With a whoosh, he bounced up from the chair. What? 30% is a lot. That won't do. 20% is fine. White Shuang looked very careful, showing his worry and nervousness. No, it's not much. 30% is already very good. The laughing Slamu had already walked over from the chair and came to White Shuang's side. He was very clear that in Ely, food was priceless. Anyone who had some skills and some strength would be hoarding food. They were afraid that if there was a war, there would be no food to eat. Who would be willing to sell food? Not to mention 30%, even if it was doubled or even tripled, they would still easily sell it. Thinking about it this way, this was definitely a big deal. White Shuang had undoubtedly become a noble person in his eyes. He immediately came to White Shuang's side with a face full of smiles. His eyes were filled with indescribable passion. Because he was too passionate, White Shuang couldn't help but take a step back. General, don't lie to me. Is 30% really no problem? White Shuang's eyes moved as he spoke, showing his shrewd side on his face. Of course there's no problem. I'll take as much as you send, ha ha ha. Slamu laughed loudly. He originally thought that after being sent to this remote little city, it would be difficult for him to achieve anything in his life. He didn't think that a good thing would fall into his lap. How could he not grasp it? At this moment, White Shuang's heart finally settled. The business was more or less done. Next, White Shuang brought up the 2 boxes of silver he had prepared. At this moment, Slamu was shocked to the point of choking. He had a new understanding of White Shuang's wealth and no longer doubted it. After all, if he didn't have a request, why would he give him so many benefits first? Regardless of whether there was food or not, just based on these 2 boxes of silver, it was not a loss to make this friend. The things that should be set up were done. Everything that followed was much easier. Bringing White Shuang and the others to the residence, a banquet was set up. Under White Shuang's request, all the officers with some authority in the city were invited to the residence. At the banquet that night, Slamu even put his arm around White Shuang's shoulder in front of everyone and introduced him as his brother. In the future, everyone should give him face and so on. When the other generals saw this situation, how could they not know what to do? One by one, they took the initiative to come to White Shuang's side to toast him, wanting to get familiar with him. White Shuang's alcohol tolerance was not bad. He didn't refuse anyone and led his brothers to drink with everyone. This drinking lasted for nearly 4 hours. In the end, most of the generals in the courtyard had collapsed to the ground. White Shuang, who was also 40% drunk, shook his head. He didn't forget his mission. Looking at the battalion commander Shao Qing who hadn't drunk, he said, "Go, this is Slamu's military seal. Take it and let your brothers into the city. Gather the other soldiers in the city and watch over them." "Yes," Shao Qing said with a face full of excitement. At this moment, he was completely convinced by the military chief. He had only used 2 chests of silver to take down the entire Little Yule city without shedding a drop of blood. Most importantly, he had completely sealed off the news of the army entering the city. This was a true wise man, a true expert. Shao Qing left. Using the commander's seal, he quickly found Commander Zhuangcheng, who was waiting for news outside the city. What happened next was much simpler. The 5-star division quietly entered the city. Following that, they gathered all the guards inside. After that, they removed their weapons and became prisoners of war. All of this was completed before daybreak. Then, the signal was sent out. An extremely bright flash grenade soared into the sky. 3 li away, 2 high and the others who were waiting for news immediately brought over 30,000 soldiers towards Little Yule City. The sky finally brightened. Slamu, who was in a daze, was awoken by the urge to urinate. When he slowly opened his eyes, he didn't have the urge to urinate anymore. This was because at this moment, a steel blade was placed on his neck. Surrounding him was a group of 5-star army soldiers wearing military green uniforms. This is a dream. This must be a dream. Slamu hurriedly closed his eyes. Then, he opened them again. However, nothing had changed. There was only a fierce gaze in Commander Shaoqing's eyes. General C, you're finally awake? Then let's have a good talk now. Talk? Talk about what? Slamu's voice was trembling as he spoke. Even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't have thought that the 5-star army would appear in front of him. Even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't have thought that the enemy would leap over the mountains. Because perhaps people and horses could leap over, but what about the army's rations? How could he know that White Shuang didn't bring any rations over? He only had the soldiers carry rations for 5 days. This was because he believed that as long as they came here, there would naturally be people who would give them rations. White Shuang, who had already grasped the situation, suddenly had a fierce look in his eyes. He knew that he should show Slamu some power. Otherwise, he was afraid that this person wouldn't cooperate with him. Now that he had occupied the capital of Little Yule, there were 2 ways to enter the deeper regions of Ili Belly. The first was to head south to the capital of Big Yule. From there he would enter the Tex River, and then to the north would be the Katimian Mountains, which would be to the south of the capital of Ili Belly. The other was to head north, through the 3 cities of Nalatu, Telhala, and Kangisi, and across the Kangisi River, he would reach the capital of Ili Belly. Comparatively speaking, the latter path was more difficult to advance. However, the strength of the enemy would also be heavier. This was more in line with Yang Chendong's military plans. However, he didn't make the final choice. Everything would depend on the result of his discussion with Slamu. He believed that this person would definitely bring him a pleasant surprise. Chapter 1286. Facing Bai Shuang's murderous gaze, Slamu's heart trembled. He had thought of something, and his thoughts came true. He heard Bai Shuang say coldly, I can tell you now that I'm not a merchant. We're the 5-star army. We've crossed Tian Shan Mountain to come here. This time, we're here to take your king's dog life. Trust me, it won't be long before this place becomes the territory of our 5-star army. All the soldiers here who oppose us will be killed or become captives who will never see the light of day. You're very lucky to be caught by us first. Now, you're still useful. As long as you're willing to cooperate with us, I promise you'll live a good life. Of course, you can choose not to cooperate. However, I know you, but the blade in my hand doesn't. Please make your choice. As he spoke, he intentionally waved the blade in his hand. The sharp blade flashed in front of Slamu, scaring him out of his wits. Speaking of which, no one wasn't afraid of death. Especially Slamu, who was used to being a general. He could treat other people's lives like grass, but he couldn't do that to himself. In addition, he had been marginalized for many years. He had a lot of complaints against the upper echelons, so he wasn't loyal at all. Now, in order to survive, he didn't have any psychological pressure. He already had the thought of surrendering, but he still wanted to fight for more benefits. After Slamu's eyes looked around, he looked at Bai Shuang who was waiting for an answer and said, How can I believe you? How can the glory and wealth you speak of be fulfilled? Even at this time, Slamu was still thinking about how to obtain more benefits for himself. In the eyes of these people, there was no such thing as a nation, a country, or dignity. They only cared about their own benefits. If these people were in the 5-star army, needless to say, once they were discovered, they wouldn't be put in an important position. They might even be kicked out of the army at any time and sent to be punished. Bai Shuang looked down on these people. His tone wasn't polite. Slamu, you're now our prisoner. Do you think you still have the right to talk about conditions? You can only choose to believe us now. Otherwise, we'll cut you in half right now and hang you on the city wall to let you have a taste of the wind and rain. No, I'll cooperate with you. I'll completely cooperate with you. I just hope you keep your promise. When Slamu heard these ruthless words and saw Bai Shuang's unfriendly gaze, he immediately replied with a face full of fear. Bai Shuang was very satisfied with just a scare and Slamu was convinced. In order to make the other party cooperate with him better, White Shuang also intentionally retracted his killing intent, and a smile appeared on his face. That's the way, right? Don't worry, our 5-star army are very friendly to our friends. You can also go and scare them a little. As long as our 5-star army occupies a place, most of the local generals will be responsible for the security work. If your performance is satisfactory, not only will you receive a large amount of rewards, you might even have the chance to become the general of this area in the future. Good, good. Hearing that if he did his job well, he would even have a higher position, Slamu's eyes revealed a look of yearning. He immediately nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Very quickly, he told White Double Ears everything he knew, including the military arrangements of the nearby cities and the situation of the military forces. Tu Hai and the other 3 division commanders were already waiting in the hall. When Bai Shuang brought Slamu in front of them, the attitude of the 4 was clearly much more respectful than before. They had already heard about what had happened. Bai Shuang was the commander of an army, and his status was extremely noble. However, he had still entered the tiger's den, daring to bring a few dozen people into Little Yule City. Then, without harming a single brother, he had taken control of the situation here. Just based on this, it wasn't something the 4 division commanders could do. They might be able to take down Little Yule City with a small price, but they definitely couldn't do it as quietly as Bai Shuang. The most important thing was that the news of them appearing here wasn't leaked. This gave them more time to prepare and choose, creating better conditions for the next attack. After Bai Shuang entered the hall, he noticed the attitude of the 4 division commanders. They were clearly more respectful. This made him very satisfied. He didn't expect these people to immediately submit to him, but as long as they didn't hinder him, he believed that his performance in the future would make them truly submit. You're all here. Let me introduce you. This is General Slamu. He is now our friend and is willing to provide us with everything we need to know. He is also willing to cooperate with us. Now, let's ask him to explain the surrounding situation. Bai Shuang smiled and nodded at Slamu. He had already heard it once. Now that he had Slamu explain it again, it wasn't that Bai Shuang's memory was bad. On the contrary, he was very smart. The reason why he did this, other than letting the 4 division commanders understand the situation, he also wanted to test Slamu again and see if he introduced the same thing twice. Once he found a problem, he would properly explain it. Fortunately, Slamu really surrendered at this moment, so what he said was naturally true. 2 introductions, the language might be reversed, but the meaning didn't change. Bai Shuang finally relaxed. He looked at the 4 division commanders and said, "Now that everyone understands the situation, let's talk about what you all think." The East Army's new 5th Army. After speeding up their march all the way to Lopner River, they went straight to Lop City in the southwest direction. Under the lead of Shi Wanshan, they advanced at a speed of a few hundred li per day. What they wanted was to take the enemy by surprise. They wanted to directly attack the enemy. According to Yang Chendong's request, they moved unhindered in the Yarqiang Kingdom, so that they didn't have time and energy to deal with the Turpan Kingdom. The 5-star army's main force would be able to take over the Turpan Kingdom. The new army also bypassed Khaleesi City and came to the Iron Gate Pass behind it, cutting off the retreat of the Turpan Kingdom's army, making it a completely isolated city. It also forced Harden Barter to send reinforcements. The strategy of encircling and attacking reinforcements has been formed. In the Turpan Kingdom, when all kinds of information were gathered through the radio, young Chendong was naturally very satisfied after reading it. It can be said that the performance of the 3 armies was better than he expected. They didn't care about the gains and losses of a city and only wanted to destroy the enemy's strength. This kind of strategic thinking was very advanced. He believed that when the enemy reacted, it would be too late for them to regret it. For now, let these 3 monkeys continue to cause trouble. When the time is right, it will be time for him to lead the army to battle. At this time, Yang Chendong's mood was very good. Beta Persei noticed this and hurriedly came over. Young master, you also have to take care of your body. Don't always be like this. If you have work, you can give it to others. Knowing that Beta Persei was concerned about him, Yang Chendong had a smile on his face. How could he not want to rest? But anyone who wanted to achieve such a big goal in a short period of time would have no time to rest. How is Division Commander Tian and Division Commander Ling doing? The 2 people he was talking about were the Division Commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu, and the Division Commander of the 4th Division, Ling Daqiang. After the liberation, they received the order to liberate the Fire Province, Willow City, and other places around Turpan. As the capital of Turpan, there were many large cities and strategic towns around Turpan. It was just that because of the geographical location, they couldn't provide much protection. When Harden Barter escaped, he didn't escape to those places, causing them to become isolated cities. For the safety of the rear, Yang Chendong decided to liberate these cities. Only then could he walk out of Turpan without any worries. When it came to the situation of these cities, Beta Persei's face immediately showed an excited expression. Young master, everything is going well. The Fire Province has been taken. So fast? Hearing that the Fire Province had been captured, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with surprise. Tell me the details. Yes. We first sent people to the Fire Province to persuade them to surrender, but the effect was not good. Although they didn't kill people because of the strength of our 5-star army, they threw the emissary out of the city, which angered the 2 division commanders. They divided the work, and the 4th Division blasted open the west gate of the Fire Province city with a few cannons. Then, Division Commander Tian who led the brave cavalry into the city. What followed was naturally a one-sided situation. The Fire Province city was broken in less than half a day. Most of the 20,000 Turpan soldiers guarding the city surrendered, and a few were killed. Now, the 2 division commanders are using the same method to go to Yanghai city. The news just came, and it seems that the problem can be solved peacefully. When talking about this, Beta Persei's face was full of joy. Clearly, this person was a warmonger in his bones. Yang Chendong was also very satisfied after hearing this. Yes, that's right. If we don't attack, then it's fine. If we move, then it's like a bolt of lightning. Don't give them a chance to fight back. Of course, if we can solve the problem without using a single soldier, then that's naturally the best. Yes, I'll immediately send someone to pass on the young master's order. Beta Persei knew that Yang Chendong was a person who loved his soldiers like his children. This was also because he didn't want to make too many sacrifices, so he immediately nodded. Then, seeing that Yang Chendong was indeed in a good mood, he tried to suggest, "Young master, today's official business is not so busy. Why don't we take a walk on the street? You don't know, but Turpan city is very lively right now." Chapter 1287. Yang Chendong was right about this. Ever since this place was occupied by the 5-star army, especially after the previous siege of Turpan, the hearts of the people here had all fallen to the 5-star army side. In addition, this was a big city and the front line of the battle, so it naturally became the first choice of the fleeing people of the 3 kingdoms. They had already made sufficient preparations, and there was enough food in the city. There were nearly 100 big and small grain stores, which greatly solved the problem of food for the people. More and more people stayed here, so it was naturally very lively. Yang Chendong sat in the palace every day. Even if he did not step out of the palace, he could still understand a lot of things through the radio. This made it difficult for him to have any leisure time. Now that the military affairs were going smoothly, he could take a walk on the streets to understand the actual situation. If he discovered some practical problems, he would not have to work and rest. After thinking about it, he did not leave the palace for a long time, so he nodded. Okay, then go and make the arrangements. Remember, don't bring too many guards. Don't disturb the security of the city. Since he said not to bring too many guards, Beta Persei did not dare to be negligent. As the core of Yang Xia and the soul of the 5-star army, his safety had always been the most important. After Beta Persei got Yang Chendong's approval, he quickly went out and called the Longwei's first captain, Qiu Vi, over. Then a team of 50 Longwei elites changed into casual clothes and prepared. This was only what could be seen. There were still 200 Longwei members who would follow outside. Once they found any problems, they would immediately appear and provide support. Yang Chendong also changed into a green robe and led Beta Persei, Qiu Vi, and the others out of the palace to the streets. At this time, Turpan City was indeed as Beta Persei had said. The streets were crowded with people, and it was a lively scene. On both sides of the road, there were countless shops of all kinds. Everything related to food, clothing, housing, and transportation was not lacking. These were all operated by the people of other races who had migrated here. Their arrival made the city even more lively and prosperous, filled with people. Occasionally, people in ragged clothes could be seen on the streets. They were all people who had fled from Turpan, Yarqiang, and Ili. Every time they saw them, they could see the surprise and caution in their eyes. They were surprised by the prosperity of Turpan City, and careful that their identity and clothes seemed to be somewhat out of place here. As the group walked, Beta Persei introduced what he had learned to Yang Chendong. Young master, these people will generally be observed for 2 days after entering the city. First, let them feel the prosperity of our Yang Xia land. This will make them more confident in their future life and make them more prepared to integrate here in the future. Second, it will also make it easier for our soldiers to observe them. If there are spies from the 3 kingdoms among them, they will often give themselves away and it will be easier for us to screen them. Of course, after 2 days, those who have no problems will be invited to the shelter in the city to register. Then, they will be transported to the beginning city by the vehicles transporting supplies. There, they will report to the logistics headquarters of Yang Xi for resettlement and distribution. Yang Chendong listened silently and nodded from time to time. He doesn't pay too much attention to these things now. With Yang Xia on the right track, he only needs to make decisions on some important matters. These matters will naturally be handled by specialized personnel. Sometimes, when they report the results, he may not even check them. Not bad, this is a good way to deal with it. The governor of the Far Eastern state, Chen Bo, sent a telegram a while ago, saying that there is a large amount of newly opened land that no one is planting. Moreover, the land there is very fertile. It is really too wasteful. Now that we need manpower, we can consider letting Yang Xi send more people over. Listening to Yang Chendong's instructions, Beta Persei of course agreed and kept it in mind. At this time, he was not only the captain of Yang Chendong's guards, but also the butler, secretary, assistant and other positions. It can be said that he has a high position and power, but he is also very busy. While they were talking, the road in front suddenly became very crowded. Looking from a distance, they could see that many people were gathered there, and it seemed that there were a lot of people. On the periphery, many 5th-star army soldiers in military green uniforms were maintaining law and order. What's going on? With so many people crowded here, Yang Chendong asked with a slight frown. Go and ask around. Beta Persei didn't often go out of the palace, so he naturally didn't know. He ordered Qiu Vi beside him. Very quickly, the 2 quick-witted dragon guards rushed forward and returned after a short while. Because they were on the street, they didn't salute Yang Chendong. Instead, they cupped their hands and said, "Sixth young master, the female soldiers in the propaganda office are setting up a stage to perform a show. There are many people watching nearby." Oh. The propaganda office. Hearing this, Yang Chendong was also interested. He laughed and said with great interest, "Then let's go and take a look." Okay, I'll arrange it. Beta Persei quickly agreed. Of course, He wouldn't let the young master and the people crowded together to watch the show. If that happened, safety would be a big problem. Immediately, he sent out a few people to look for a spot nearby. He had heard that as long as there was a performance, there would be good observation points in the nearby restaurants. Usually, these places would be occupied by the soldiers of the 5-star army in advance to prevent people from causing trouble and causing problems in terms of safety. Not long after the Long Wei left, they came back to report that they had found the 3rd floor of a restaurant. The location was excellent and the view was excellent. The 5th-star army soldiers who were responsible for observing there had already withdrawn. They were only waiting for Yang Qindong to go. Let's go. Yang Qindong also knew that with his current status, it was really not suitable for him to mingle with the people. At least, it was not possible in Turpan City, where the situation was not completely stable. So he nodded and let the Long Wei lead him to a nearby restaurant. The 3rd floor was high and looked down from above. It was the big stage of the propaganda office. From here, he could overlook everything. There were originally a few tables on the 3rd floor, but they were completely empty at this moment. The table with the best view had a fruit plate placed on it. Yang Qindong naturally sat at the head of the table. He looked around and saw that the soldiers of the propaganda office were performing. There were many female soldiers among them, and all of them were young and beautiful. Their presence made the show even more attractive. Not long after Yang Qindong sat down, footsteps came from the stairs of the 3rd floor, followed by soft greetings. Yang Qindong's ears were extraordinary, so he naturally heard it clearly. Everyone was calling the 8th vice-captain. Needless to say, it must be Ba Daojiang, the vice-captain of the Long Wei 1st Brigade. It was Ba Daojiang. He was off duty today. He had just heard that Yang Qindong came out of the palace and came to the street, so he quickly rushed over. As soon as he entered the 3rd floor and saw Yang Qindong sitting there, he immediately gave a standard military salute. Okay, you're not wearing your military uniform, so there's no need to salute. Yang Qindong looked at Ba Daojiang with a satisfied gaze and nodded gently. Although Ba Daojiang was not the first person to follow Yang Qindong, he was an old man who had been here before the origin city was built. He had always been good and was responsible for Yang Qindong's safety. He had never neglected his duties. Yang Qindong's attitude toward such a person was naturally much more casual. Yang Qindong's tone was so casual. When Captain Xiao Vi heard it, he chuckled and then took the opportunity to tease him. What's wrong, Vice Captain? You're here to escort the publicity department when you're on vacation. This is almost your second home. Is something good going to happen soon? The burly Ba Daojiang suddenly blushed at this time, which was rare for him. He threw a look at Xiao Vi, telling him to shut up. Although Ba Daojiang was the vice-captain, he had a very good relationship with Captain Xiao Vi. The two of them had gone through countless dangers and life-and-death situations together. Their relationship was not any worse than that of brothers. It was precisely because of this that some of his words could be said to be heard clearly by Xiao Vi. That was why he could make fun of him. Hearing this, Beta Persei and the Long Wei could not help but laugh. Only Yang Qindong looked confused. What are you talking about? When Yang Qindong asked, the people below naturally did not dare to not answer. Beta Persei then whispered in front of him, Young master, the situation is like this. Ba Daojiang has fallen in love with the publicity department's director, Shui Qing. At this time, he is stepping up his attack on the city. Oh. Yang Qindong, who heard the news, nodded as if he suddenly realized something. He was really too busy, so he naturally did not pay too much attention to the matters of the soldiers around him. However, Yang Qindong knew about Shui Qing. She was considered an old member of the publicity department and was also one of the subordinates that the 6th Madam, Wan Xiaoyu, valued. He had some impression of this person. After being exposed, Ba Daojiang's face turned even redder. At this moment, he lowered his head, losing his usual vigor. Seeing this, Yang Qindong laughed. Men should get married when they are of age. What's there to be embarrassed about? I just don't know how your progress is. Don't embarrass Long Wei. Even Yang Chendong began to make fun of him. The Long Wei could not help but laugh. Ba Daojiang, whose face was even redder, stretched his neck and said, "Sixth young master, Shui Qing has a good impression of me, but she said that she is too busy with work now, so she wants to wait a while before discussing the marriage." Obviously, Ba Daojiang was afraid that others would look down on him, so he directly admitted it. "Oh. Then there's no problem. Not bad." Hearing this answer, Yang Chendong knew that this was a matter of mutual consent. He thought that since he had nothing to do, he might as well be the matchmaker for another month. He nodded slowly and said, "We have always been very busy with work, and will only get busier in the future. How can we have time to rest? How about this, you call Shui Qing over. I will ask her. If there is no problem with her, I will make the decision for your marriage." Chapter 1288. Yang Chendong knew that there would be a huge war coming up and there would be no time left. Ba Daojiang wasn't young anymore. He might as well take this opportunity to settle the matter. It would be a good thing to fulfill someone's wish. The sixth young master was going to be the witness. Ba Daojiang grinned from ear to ear. Qiu Vi, who was standing at the side, saw that his deputy only knew how to smile and didn't do anything. He couldn't help but kick him. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and invite Miss Shui Qing over." "Oh, I'll go right away." Ba Daojiang, who had regained his senses, immediately agreed. He then turned around and disappeared from the third floor. Seeing how anxious he was, the Long Wei crowd burst into laughter. In less than an instant's time, Ba Daojiang dragged the panting Shui Qing to the third floor of the restaurant and stood in front of Yang Chendong. Shui Qing was originally organizing a performance downstairs. Previously, she was the publicity director of the Origin City region. Now, she was promoted to the publicity director of the entire grassland region. There were many things that she needed to do every day. When Ba Daojiang suddenly appeared by her side, she was both happy and surprised. When Ba Daojiang first appeared by her side and expressed his desire to pursue her, Shui Qing also fell in love with this honest man. Later on, because of work, the two of them spent more time apart than together. However, this didn't dilute their feelings for each other. Instead, it made them feel like they were newlyweds every time they met. Later on, when the two of them were talking about marriage, Ba Daojiang even said that he would find a chance to report this matter to the sixth young master and invite him to be the witness. Regarding this matter, Shui Qing only listened to it for a while. What kind of person was the sixth young master? How many things did he have to do every day? How would he have the time to deal with these small matters? Although Ba Daojiang was the vice captain of the Black Cavalry 1st Platoon and could be considered one of Yang Chendong's men, she didn't have any illusions. She didn't expect that Ba Daojiang would suddenly appear just now. Shui Qing thought that he missed her again. Just when she was overjoyed, but because she was too busy with work, Ba Daojiang suddenly grabbed her hand. Then, the two of them ran out in front of all the people backstage of the publicity department. Although Shui Qing had long acknowledged her relationship with Ba Daojiang and thought that she was his woman for the rest of her life. However, the wedding banquet had not been held yet, and the two of them were still scrupulously abiding by their identities. They had never had any physical intimacy. Now that her hand was grabbed in front of everyone, she blushed. When she finally reacted, her expression became even better. At the same time, she blamed Ba Daojiang and asked him to let go of her hand and let her go. "All right, let's not worry about other things at this time. The sixth young master is waiting for us upstairs. Let's go." Ba Daojiang knew what Shui Qing was thinking. Women were always shy. However, he really didn't have time to wait. Who knew if there would be some urgent matter that would call the sixth young master back? If that was the case, he would miss a great opportunity. Just now, the platoon leader took the opportunity to tell the sixth young master about him. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Holding Shui Qing's hand, he jogged all the way to the third floor of the restaurant and stood in front of Yang Chendong. When she saw Yang Chendong with her own eyes, Xu Weiqing's heart, which was already racing from jogging all the way, started to beat even faster. The current Yang Chendong was like a god in the eyes of the Yangxia people and the five-star army. Especially after the publicity department had been instructed to deliberately create a cult of personality, his reputation had spread at a rapid pace. As the most important middle-level cadre in the publicity department, Xu Weiqing naturally regarded Yang Chendong as a god. Now that she was able to get close to the god in her heart, Xu Weiqing was very excited. You must be Xu Weiqing. Not bad. He looked at Xu Weiqing and found that this girl had a great temperament. Especially when she was wearing the lieutenant colonel uniform, it made her look even more valiant and full of an indescribable heroic spirit. This girl was quite compatible with a burly man like Ba Daojiang. A single word of praise made Xu Weiqing's face blossom into a smile, like a lotus flower emerging from the water. Her face carried a brilliant yet somewhat bashful smile. Thank you for the king's praise. With Xu Weiqing's status, she could only call Yang Chendong king. She couldn't casually call him king. No problem, Director Xu Weiqing. You can call me sixth young master like Ba Daojiang. Yang Chendong smiled and said with a warm voice. In order to make Xu Weiqing feel less restrained, Yang Chendong smiled and asked about work. He knew that when interacting with people, he had to start with the areas that they were most familiar with. This way, he could quickly eliminate the barriers between them. As expected, when it came to reporting work, Xu Weiqing became less shy and more shrewd and capable. Yes, sixth young master. Under the guidance of Logistics Commander Yang, our publicity department just carried out an expansion of recruitment. To be honest, there are many girls who are good at singing and dancing in the grasslands. We went through a serious selection process. After the Political Investigation Department participated in the selection process, we recruited a total of 1,200 new members. Now, they have been divided into 12 publicity teams and have begun to perform in various places. The performance team on the streets of Turpan City today is one of them. They are currently performing the defense of Turpan City not long ago. We used the Turpan brothers, Tumu, as the model and added some exaggerated techniques to create this performance. Listening to Xu Weiqing's report, Yang Chendong was also interested. He knew about Tumu. This person was a local of Turpan City. At first, he wanted to earn money, so he joined the defense of Turpan City. Later on, he fully displayed his ability to fight on the battlefield. Now, he was already a company commander of 100 soldiers. Although his position wasn't very high, as a local of Turpan, he could be a representative and a model to promote. More often than not, the more grassroots people would resonate with them. It could be said that this was a very good example. Yes, I know about Tumu. You chose him as the model, so your train of thought is correct. Then, tell me, how are the results? Yang Chendong wanted to know what kind of changes the performance of the publicity team could bring to the overall situation. After all, if the performance was only for the sake of completing the mission, but there were no results, then the performance would lose its true meaning. At this moment, Xu Weiqing's face revealed a confident expression. Sixth young master, the results are very good. With Tumu as the model, the recruitment office has already sent a notice. Now, there are many people who have signed up. They are already too busy. Oh. Ha ha ha, not bad, not bad. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with the results. To be able to recruit more soldiers from the local area was naturally something that he was happy to see. They were familiar with the local situation and had long adapted to the local climate. With them, the combat troops could take fewer detours. Listening to Yang Chendong's praise, Xu Weiqing's face was even sweeter than eating honey, and her small face was bright red. Seeing that Yang Chendong was in a good mood, Beta Persei also thought of some things he had heard before. He decided to put in more effort and put in some good words for Xu Weiqing. When he was pursuing Kikage, this director Xu Weiqing helped him a lot. He would not forget this favor. Young master, I heard that since the performance of the publicity team, the people have a better understanding of our army and some of our policies, so the voices and emotions against us have decreased a lot. There's such a thing? Listening to Beta Persei's further explanation, Yang Chendong laughed out loud. Very good, this is the change brought to people's lives and work by literature and art. Well, I hope the publicity department will continue to expand the performance team. I think 10 teams are a bit too few. I'll talk to Yang Si later, it should be expanded. 100 is not a lot. Since Yang Chendong said so, Shui Qing immediately agreed happily and kept nodding. She would not forget that when she wanted to expand the publicity department, she had to persuade Yang Si for a long time. If she did not have the backing of the 6th Madam, Wan Xiaoyu, she was afraid that the expansion of these 10 teams would not be supported. But now it was different. With Yang Chendong's endorsement, it would be much easier to go to the logistics headquarters to ask for people and money. Even the 6th young master was so supportive of their work and praised their work. Who would dare to neglect it? Who would not listen to the 6th young master's words? This meeting was a happy one for everyone. After all, Yang Chendong had too many things to do. He stayed in the restaurant for a while and watched the performance below. He saw that there were more and more people gathering around, and they all revealed looks of curiosity, especially some young people. No matter if they were men or women, they all revealed looks of yearning. Yang Chendong knew that the performance of the publicity team could continue to be carried out in order to win more people's hearts and gain more people's support. Speaking of publicity teams, it was very difficult for the people to see them in the past. Occasionally, some vaudeville troupes could perform on the streets. There was no Peking opera in that era. And where could they find so many handsome men and beautiful women in such troupes? Where could they find such good and diverse education and story themes? The publicity team was a pioneer. As soon as they appeared, they attracted everyone's attention. Regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, they liked them very much. It was precisely because they liked him that they were willing to learn more about him. Then, they would know more about the 5-star army and Yang Shi. This kind of publicity could often achieve something that even 1,000,000 soldiers couldn't do. When Yang Chendong brought people to watch the performance on the streets and did not return, the 1st Cavalry Division had already taken down Yanghe City and was cleaning up the battlefield. Chapter 1289. The newly appointed commander of the 4th Regiment, Su Kuda, looked at the corpses of the Turpan soldiers strewn about in front of him and felt a wave of dizziness. If his memory served him right, the battle had only lasted for an hour, but the 7,000 Turpan soldiers in the city had been utterly defeated. Just the 4th Regiment that he led had killed over 400 of the enemy, capturing close to 1,000. The most inconceivable thing was that not a single one of his soldiers had died in battle. Only 4 of them had been injured, and most of them were light injuries. They only needed to be treated before they could return to the battlefield. This was completely different from the bloody battle he had imagined. Although before the 1st Cavalry Division had entered the city, Leng Feng and the 4th Regiment had already used their cannons to blast through the city gates, preventing them from bearing the burden of sieging the city, but after entering the city, the performance of the cavalry under him was simply too valiant. Any Turpan soldier in front of them was easily defeated by a single charge, to the point that the enemy did not even have the strength to retaliate. Rather than calling it a battle, it was more accurate to call it a massacre. He had long heard that the 1st Cavalry Division was the most valiant cold weapon unit in the 5-star army, but having experienced it personally, he could not imagine it to be so valiant. In comparison, he felt that the victories he had won in the past did not count as much. In fact, they could not even be called great victories, and could only be described as obvious victories. Su Kuda couldn't be blamed for this. In the past, he had led an army of foreign races. Although there were some soldiers with good physical fitness, they didn't have much organization. It was difficult for them to coordinate well in battle. Yang Chendong also didn't give them more time to train. He simply let these soldiers search for experience on the battlefield. With the mentality of eliminating sand from the waves, this kind of army often didn't have much fewer casualties than the enemy. After spending so much time with such an army, it would be strange if he was not surprised to see the strength of the 1st Cavalry Division. While he was still in a daze, a cavalry unit came over from the side. The leader was the 5th Regiment commander, Gong Feng. As the two regiments were not far from each other, he had also noticed Su Keda's performance. Gong Feng was curious about this regiment commander who had fallen from the position of commander and had his own opinions. Gong Feng believed that Su Keda was only punished because he had done something wrong. He still had a bright future ahead of him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been demoted to a regiment commander but directly handed over to the disciplinary investigation department. Besides, this was the position of the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. In his opinion, the value of this position was no less than that of an ordinary division commander. In fact, it might even be better. Su Keda wouldn't lose out much by coming here. Unlike them, this person would leave this place soon. After all, someone who was chosen by the 6th young master to be the commander of an army must have extraordinary ability in commanding an army. Since that was the case, there were only benefits and no disadvantages to befriending this person. Regiment Commander Su, the battlefield should be pretty much cleaned up, right? Using the opportunity when the team walked past the 4th Regiment, Gong Feng casually spoke. "Oh, it's Regiment Commander Gong. Is your 5th Regiment done?" Seeing that it was Gong Feng who was speaking to him, Su Keda didn't dare to be negligent. He knew that other than himself, the other 4 regimental commanders were all very powerful. In terms of commanding ability, they weren't any worse than him. It's done. You can also hurry up here. In fact, cleaning up the battlefield this time is relatively simple. The Mongol army from that day has already arrived. Let them take over. Our 1st Cavalry Division needs to show our might on the battlefield. There's no need to be serious about cleaning up the battlefield," Gong Feng said with his experience. Then he nodded at Su Keda and led the team away. Looking at Gong Feng's departing figure, Su Keda thanked him. Gong Feng had come to give him advice. It seems that he would have to learn how to adapt in the future. Of course, he knew that he wouldn't be here for too long. This could be seen from the attitude of Division Commander Tianhu and the other regimental commanders towards him. They were very polite to him, to the point that they treated him as a guest and not one of their own. Su Keda naturally wouldn't think that he could integrate into the enemy's camp in such a short time. What he needed to do now was to use all the time he had to learn the strengths of the 1st Cavalry Division. One day, when he was leading an army by himself, he should have a big change and a better performance. After the Black Goat City was successfully broken through, the next target was Willow City. When the 4th Division of Leng Feng once again moved the cannons to the city gates, unexpectedly, they actually surrendered. The 12,000 Turkmen soldiers in the city all came out of the city and surrendered. Obviously, whether it was the Fire Province or the Black Goat City, they all knew that the strength of the 5-star army in front of them wasn't something that they could stop. Rather than losing their lives in the end, it was better to surrender now and at least keep one life. Following the capture of Willow City, in the entire east of Turkmenistan, other than the ruined city near the Hanhai Sea, there were no other Turkmen forces. Even this city only had 2,000 soldiers. Any one of them would be able to take it down. After dealing with the security threat in the east, Yang Chendong also needed to consider sending troops to Turkmenistan. It was time to completely destroy the Turkmenistan forces. He had this plan a long time ago. Once the various forces were in place, Yang Chendong would personally lead the troops out of Turkmenistan and begin his conquest of the Ili region. It was also at this time that the 250,000 troops of the Kazakh and Aries dynasty arrived in the Ili region. Their appearance increased the confidence of the 3 Turkmenistan countries to go against the 5-star army. After leaving Turpan, Yang Chendong decided to fight his first battle at Sabashi City, another large city in Turpan that was heading south. Based on the Intel Department's intel, there were 15,000 Turkmen soldiers in Sabashi City. They had already made preparations to defend the city. There was enough grain in the city, and there were huge rocks, logs, and kerosene on the city walls. They were just waiting for the 5-star army to arrive and teach them a lesson. The morale of an army depended on whether they won the battle or not. Let's put it this way, if they were defeated in a few battles, any army would face a situation where their morale was low. If there was even the slightest movement, it was very likely that they would collapse. Sabashi City was the first line of defense that Hardened Bartle had left for the 5-star army. He did not even hope that the city could be defended. As long as he could delay for a period of time and make it difficult for the 5-star army, it would be considered a victory. This way, once winter arrived, the 5-star army would have no choice but to stop attacking. He wanted to see how long the 5-star army could stay here. In short, Hardened Bartle was using the word holding back. He would not take the initiative to fight the 5-star army. He wanted to use the cities one by one to slow down the 5-star army's advance. Once the 5-star army's main force dared to go around these cities, he would find a way to cut off the enemy's logistical supply and force the enemy to retreat. Unlike the new army and the other 3 armies, the 5-star army's original goal was not to attack cities. Therefore, once they encountered a city that was difficult to attack, they only needed to go around it. As for the problem of the army's food, they could fight while looting. This was what people often said about using war to support war. Although they were both part of the 5-star army, Yang Chendong's main force could not do this. His goal was to capture cities and seize large amounts of territory. Therefore, no matter how one looked at it, the loss of Sabashi City could not be avoided. Yang Chendong did not think about going around it. With firearms and cannons that were hundreds of years ahead of this era, why would he want to go around it? Sieging a city? This should be his favorite mode of war. Send down the order. The 4th Lu Division will be the vanguard, the Liaodong Division will be the left, and the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division will be the right. After the 4th Lu Division breaks through the gates of Sabashi City, the left and right cavalry will enter the city together. Those who surrender will live, those who resist will die. After the order was sent down, close to 30,000 5-star army moved out, leaving Yang Chendong's main force and surging forward. Yang Chendong, who was very confident in this battle, called over General Narasong of the Mongol Alliance Army and said, "Go and arrange for the people who are preparing to migrate to enter the city. Also, move all the people who should be migrating out. If there are people who are unwilling to leave their homes, forcefully take them away. If they resist, kill without mercy. Those who are not of my race will definitely have different intentions." Yang Chendong never had much patience for other factions and races. It was best if they agreed to surrender. As long as they listened to him, he did not mind giving them a better living environment. On the other hand, if they did not want to give him face, he would kill them all. He wanted to let others know that Bugnam of Gojoseon's temper was not so good. With the order given, the 5-star army quickly got busy. Following behind the main force, the Land Reform Committee also sent out a small team to follow the people who were preparing to move to Sabashi City. Yang Chendong's time was limited, and he would not waste too much time in Ili. He wanted to solve the problem here as quickly as possible. Previously, when the new army passed by this place, they chose to go around it. This made the Turpan soldiers heave a sigh of relief. This time, when they saw another batch of 5-star army appear here, they knew that it would be hard to avoid this battle. However, under the orders of the defending general, they were prepared for battle. At the same time, smoke signals were lit up on the city walls, sending out warning signals. Chapter 1290. The current situation of the Turpan army was extremely bad, to the point of being somewhat miserable. In their own territory, they couldn't even communicate with each other. The only way to contact each other was to use smoke signals to determine whether they were in danger or not. This naturally had a lot to do with the fact that the new army was attacking everywhere. They did not focus on attacking cities, but rather on reducing the enemy's strength. The new Third Army had regiments and even battalions as units. Once they found a Turpan army, they would appear from all directions to surround and annihilate them. As time passed, the Turpan army could only hole up in their cities, not daring to take half a step out. They did not even dare to leave their cities, nor did they have the communication devices of the 5-star army. Right now, they were like fat lambs in a pen, waiting to be slaughtered. As the smoke signals rose, the city walls of Sabashi were filled with Turpan soldiers. They had even learned from the 5-star army's experience in defending Turpan, gathering the civilians who had not fled. They wanted to borrow the strength of the civilians to defend the city. However, unlike the 5-star army, they did not provide any benefits to the civilians. They were completely using the situation of grabbing able-bodied men to chase the civilians to the city walls. This method of using the civilians as cannon fodder naturally attracted the curses of the civilians. Tuoshuan City wasn't a small city. It could be considered one of the most important cities in the Turpan Kingdom. However, because it was too close to the main force of the 5-star army, the Turpan soldiers had long fled. There were no civilians left in the city. The moment the 5-star army arrived, they were able to move in smoothly. The largest mansion in the city also became Yang Chendong's temporary resting place. Before the residence could be completely cleaned up, the battle report from the front lines was sent over by Wang Shan. When Yang Chendong saw the contents of 4th Master Lu's report, he couldn't help but laugh heartily. His face was filled with joy as he said, "This is really like the saying, if you don't seek death, you won't die." The Turpan soldiers are forcing the civilians like this. How can they still have the hearts of the people? Once the hearts of the people turn against us, we can save a lot of trouble by occupying this place. Beta Persei at the side also saw the telegram and nodded in agreement. That's right, it seems that the Turpan army does not treat the civilians as humans at all. This will cause the civilians to riot. They are shooting themselves in the foot. After saying this, Beta Persei had a worried look on his face. He continued, "There are so many civilians on the city walls. Are we still going to continue running?" "Of course." Yang Chendong said with an extremely confident tone, "Right now, the civilians are not our civilians. We have no obligation to ensure their safety. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for following the wrong master. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for not escaping from Supa City in time. Send an order, Division Commander De Chong, tell him not to have any misgivings and to proceed with the original plan. In doing so, the lives of some civilians would naturally be sacrificed, but this was not in Yang Chendong's eyes. If it had to be said, he was a staunch nationalist. If the people standing on the city walls were Han civilians, he would definitely refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vases. This was also the reason why Yang Xie did not directly declare war on Baiming and Nanming even though he was so powerful. However, there was no need to be polite to the foreigners. The deaths of these civilians would be blamed on the Turpan government. After the unexpected situation occurred, Division Commander De Chong had no choice but to report it, but he did not stop the work at hand. The muzzles of the cannons that should be adjusted were already in place. With his understanding of the 6th young master, just these foreigners alone would not be able to stop the 5-star army's determination to occupy this place. As expected, the order to attack according to the original plan was sent to him. Immediately, Division Commander De Chong did not hold back. He raised the red flag high and roared, "Fire!" Boom! 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 In just the first round of bombardment, out of the 6 cannonballs, 2 cannonballs accurately landed on the northern city gate. The tall city gate that normally required at least 4 people to close began to tremble as if it would break open at any moment. Second round of cannons, continue. Division Commander De Chong lowered the red flag in his hand again. Immediately, another round of cannons was fired, causing the ground to tremble again. On the city walls of Suba, the cannons suddenly fell. This caused the Turpan civilians, who were originally unwilling to go up the city walls, to have a drastic change in expression. The cowardly ones had already wet their pants and sat down on the ground. Their legs were trembling, and they had no strength to stand up. Most of the civilians were like this because they had never seen such powerful cannons before. In their eyes, firecrackers were not something they could come into contact with frequently, let alone cannons that were 10,000 times more powerful. In contrast, the Turpan soldiers guarding the city were also frightened. They were not mentally prepared in this regard. When the cannons fell, especially when one of the cannons landed among them, it immediately caused dozens of casualties. Looking at the broken limbs everywhere, and the smell of blood directly assaulted their nostrils. The soldiers were all trembling, and their hands that were holding swords became weak. At this point, how could they still have the time to monitor the civilians' performance? The series of cannons completely disrupted the Turpan army's plan, and also caused their already low morale to drop to a freezing point. When another 6 cannons were fired, one of them destroyed the north gate of Suba. The Liaodong Cavalry Division and the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division, who had been waiting for a long time, rushed in through the gate. When the battle cries rang out in all directions, the soldiers' last line of defense completely collapsed. At this moment, most of them did not fight with their weapons. Instead, they threw down the weapons in their hands and turned to flee. This was not a battle strategy of this era, and it caused their confidence to be completely destroyed. In their hearts, an indelible thought was formed: the 5-star army was not human, and could not be defeated. The 2 divisions of cavalry smoothly entered Sabashi city from the north gate. The cannons also stopped firing, but the chaos in the city did not stop. They did not expect the 5-star army to arrive in front of them so quickly, and the Turpan soldiers in the city did not make any preparations. As a result, the 5-star army cavalry charged in all directions, and unless they threw down their weapons and surrendered, they were all killed by the brave 5-star army cavalry soldiers. There was almost no resistance, and Suba was conquered by the 5-star army. They captured and injured over 10,000 enemies, and saved over 30,000 civilians. From the start of the cannons to the end, it only took 6 hours. When the news of victory reached Yang Chendong, he waved his arms and said excitedly, "There is no need to pack up anymore. We will set off now and head to Suba. At the same time, we will inform the 4th Division and the rest of the front line to continue forward. Our next target is Kunlui City." Under the lead of Commander Bai Shuang, the 1st Army understood more about the situation in the Ili region through Slam. After discussing with the 4 division commanders, they finally gave up on Dayu City and chose to charge towards Nalatu City. Under the meticulous planning, Slam introduced the grain merchants to Nalatu City. Under the same method, they took another city without any bloodshed. It could be said that their progress was extremely fast. When they were about to take the city of Telhala, the news finally leaked out. After all, this was already within the borders of the Ili Empire. Their spies were everywhere, and it was impossible for the 30,000-strong 1st Army of the outsiders to remain completely silent. The city gates of Telhala in front of them suddenly closed, the city towers filled with soldiers. When the news reached Bai Shuangji's ears, he immediately made the decision to bring the army and the provisions he plundered from the 2 cities to attack. Just when everyone thought that a siege was about to break out, the 1st Army of the outsiders actually took a detour around the city, leaving Telhala behind. They charged straight for the capital of Ili Empire from outside the city. The 5-star army actually appeared in his own territory, and so close to the capital. When King Bao Lide heard the news, he was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. He quickly called the Prime Minister Apu to discuss countermeasures. "Prime Minister, the 5-star army actually appeared. This is all thanks to you." When Bao Lide saw Apu, he held his hand tightly and spoke with a grateful expression on his face. Before, Apu had suggested that the 5-star army didn't play by the rules when they fought. In order to prevent sneak attacks and sudden invasions, they should send out more scouts to keep an eye on the surrounding areas. Bao Lide didn't agree with this request from the bottom of his heart. He didn't think it was necessary. No matter how powerful the 5-star army was, wasn't there a heavenly mountain between them? Even if the army could come over, they wouldn't be able to transport the grain. Moreover, the 5-star army still had the Turpan kingdom to deal with. What he should do now was to do his best to solve the problem in front of him, and not go around looking for trouble with them. If this wasn't Prime Minister Apu's suggestion, King Bao lied would have directly refused. He didn't want to hurt the Prime Minister's feelings, so he reluctantly agreed and let the Prime Minister do as he saw fit. What he didn't expect was that it was all thanks to the scouts that he sent out. Otherwise, even if the 5-star army was at his doorstep, he wouldn't know anything. Apu's expression was very heavy. He didn't look happy at all because he discovered the 5-star army ahead of time. In fact, this couldn't be considered as discovering the enemy ahead of time. They had already lost Little Yule City and Nalatu City. Their reaction was already half a beat too slow. Your Majesty, I've already received the news. The 5-star army really did come from Heavenly Mountain. They didn't bring a large amount of grain, they just attacked the city and looted it. Chapter 1291. What? How can they be so bold? King Baolida's already gloomy face became even more gloomy. He didn't say anything for a long time. Yes, their guts are too big. Why don't we just eat them? Prime Minister Ali Pu hesitated for a moment before speaking with a solemn expression. Eat them up? Wouldn't that make us enemies with the 5-star army? King Baolida frowned. It was a pity that he was still hoping for a peaceful solution at a time like this. This was the sorrow of the weak. It was just like when the Japanese invaded China. Even though they knew that the enemy had ill intentions, they still restrained themselves. They only realized their mistake when they lost a large portion of their territory. The weak did not have any initiative on the battlefield. They were at the mercy of the enemy. Seeing that the king was still hesitating, Apu sighed and said, Your Majesty, we can't wait any longer. The 5-star army did not even give us a heads up before attacking us. If we don't send an army to surround them, I'm afraid that once the enemy's main force arrives, we won't be able to retaliate. We still need to think about it at length. How about this, we will only send people to block them. At the same time, we will order the cities to prepare their defenses and observe the situation. King Baolida was still hoping that the 5-star legion would be at a disadvantage on the main battlefield, and they would be stopped by the Turpan Kingdom's army. If this was the case, perhaps they wouldn't even need to make a move. The 5-star army would have to withdraw from this place. In this way, they would be able to obtain victory without shedding a drop of blood on their blades. Once the 5-star army retreated, they would not lose any strength. Wouldn't that be the best time to take over the Turpan and Yarkiang territories? At this moment, King Baoli was still dreaming of unifying the entire region. It was as the saying goes, a fool's dream. Apu naturally did not agree with King Baoli's words. However, he was a subject and the other party was the king. Since that was the case, he could only obey. Alright, then order the cities to defend first. Let's observe the situation first. There was one more thing that Apu didn't say. Once the ambitions of the 5-star army were exposed, the king would have no choice but to send troops to suppress them. After the two of them had a detailed discussion, the king of Baoli issued a number of orders to the generals of the major cities in Ili, telling them to exercise restraint and pay close attention to the 5-star army's movements. At the same time, they were to guard their own cities well. If it wasn't necessary, they were to not engage the 5-star army in a direct confrontation. King Bao was satisfied. He believed that as long as he didn't provoke the other party, the 5-star army would leave if they couldn't take down the city. At the very least, his losses wouldn't be too great. On the other hand, Arup was unwilling to leave. He could clearly see how ambitious the 5-star army was. Their strength was not something a small country like Turpan could satisfy. Right now, the most important thing to do was to unite and fight against the enemy together, and not watch each other make fools of themselves and be defeated one by one. I can only persuade His Majesty next time. Let's go back. After leaving the palace, Arup sat in a sedan and headed back to the Prime Minister's residence under the protection of 20 guards. What he didn't know was that after he left this time, when he returned to this place, everything had changed. Just as Arup and his men left the palace, several pairs of eyes stared at them from a dark corner. Soon, a very small voice sounded out. The target has left the palace and is heading back to his own residence. Tell everyone to be prepared. The journey from the royal palace to the prime minister's residence was about 6 li. Along the way, they had to pass through a rather remote street. Here, this street was filled with dozens of black shadows. All of them only had one goal, and that was the slowly approaching palanquin. Arab sat in the sedan with his eyes closed and a worried expression on his face. The king's reaction and point of view were very different from his, and this made him very vexed. He had always believed that he was the enemy. When facing the ambitious 5-star army, it was fine if he didn't make a move, but if he did, he had to make sure that he hit the enemy with a heavy blow. Only then could he make the enemy feel pain and retreat. Although doing this might lead to the retaliation of the 5-star army, if he didn't do this, would they let him off so easily? The 5-star army's strategic intentions were very clear. They had set their sights on this piece of land and wanted to occupy it. This created an irreconcilable conflict between the two sides. Since this was the case, what difference did it make if they started the war a day earlier or a day later? If they didn't take advantage of the fact that the enemy had yet to gain a firm foothold and missed this opportunity, they might not have another chance like this in the future. No, I have to persuade His Majesty in the future that he can't be soft on the 5-star army. The enemy only has 30,000 cavalry. As long as he plans well, with the geographical advantage, it won't be difficult to mobilize 100,000 cavalry. At that time, with an absolute advantage in numbers, victory will be within reach. As he muttered to himself, several military plans began to take shape in Apal's mind. Clang, clang. The palanquin suddenly fell to the ground without any warning. Alipo, who was deep in thought, lost his balance and nearly fell out of the palanquin. The sudden change caused his expression to change. He immediately shouted angrily. What's going on? Although Apal's temperament was good and he took good care of the people around him, anyone would be angry after being tossed around like this. He was also an exception. After shouting angrily, he wanted to lift the palanquin to check. But before he could do anything, the palanquin's curtains opened from the outside, and a very unfamiliar face appeared. After carefully sizing up the shocked Apu, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. That's right. We can verify his identity now. Take him away. What did he mean by verifying his identity? Apal didn't quite understand, but he knew it wasn't anything good. When he thought of the fact that he was in the middle of the city and there should be soldiers patrolling around, he wanted to shout loudly to attract more people. But his actions were already under the eyes of the stranger. He saw an arm coming at him through the air, then his neck stiffened. His body fell to the side and he lost consciousness. Just like that, Prime Minister Apal was taken away. More than an hour later, a group of patrolling soldiers passed by and saw the sedan. After confirming that it belonged to the Prime Minister, they immediately sent people to investigate. It didn't take long for the news of Prime Minister Apal's disappearance to reach the palace. Soon, King Bao Li's shouts could be heard. Find him. Find him even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground. These shouts caused the generals who came to report to tremble and complain inwardly. But if they knew that Apal had already been sent out of the capital by the intelligence department, they wouldn't be complaining, they would be crying for help. Soon, the news reached the ears of Yang Qindong, who was on his way to Kunlost City. His expression didn't change, and he said in a thick voice, Understood, tell Chuisho to protect Apal's safety. This person is very useful. This matter was arranged by Yang Qindong. To be able to become a famous prime minister, there are many records in history. Such a person, Yang Qindong has a lot of scruples in his heart. Of course, he wouldn't underestimate such an opponent, so he sent Chuisho to lead ninjas to carry out the kidnapping plan. The operation code was called Needle Extraction. Sure enough, they didn't disappoint. The ninjas who dared to fully submit to the Prime Minister were able to do such a thing without anyone noticing. After contacting the local situation team, they quickly made a targeted plan. A burst of poisonous smoke was scattered, and the whole operation didn't cause any commotion. Without Apal's protection, it was like a bird that lost a wing. The threat it posed was greatly reduced. This also created more opportunities for Bai Shuang's First Army's military plan. For example, after receiving the king's order, the cities of the Yili Empire were all in a state of self-defense. Their gates were tightly closed, and they looked like they were on the verge of death. But what they didn't know was that Shuang Bai never intended to attack a city. Even when he took over Little Yule City, it was only to replenish his food supplies. Their main task was to cause destruction, to disrupt the social order of the Yili Empire, and to attack their strength. Some large cities have the help of their gates, which can be closed for defense. But some villages and towns can't, and these places became the targets of the First Army. They rode fast horses and rushed into the houses of large families, but whenever they encountered resistance, they would kill without mercy. After creating one bloody case after another, they would even open the granaries of the rich families. Apart from taking away some of the things that they needed, they would leave the rest untouched, allowing the wind to blow on them, allowing the sun to shine on them, and allowing the ordinary people around to spy on them. At first, the commoners were afraid of the power of these large families, so they didn't dare act rashly. But one day passed, 2 days passed, and some of the more daring people entered the manor. When they saw the ground covered in corpses, the fear in their hearts disappeared, and the piles of food that had already been opened up were quickly snatched clean by these people. This happened once, and when this happened frequently, and the large family's food was exposed to the commoners again and again, they no longer hesitated, nor would they wait for a day or two. They only needed to see the 5-star Army's cavalry leave, and then they would take action to snatch. The news that they could fill their stomachs quickly spread like the wind, to the extent that in some places, before the 5-star Army appeared, some of the more daring commoners gathered together and charged into the large families, killing people and giving out food, and in the end, shifting the blame to the 5-star Army. Chapter 1292. To be able to store so much food at home in a year of famine, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was rich and heartless. If such a person died, then so be it, there was nothing to feel pity about. As for shifting the blame to the 5-star Army, Bai Shuang didn't really care. These people's actions had indirectly helped him, expanding the reputation of the 5-star Army, so why not? Bai Shuang clearly remembered that his teacher Yang Qindong had said more than once that the existence of social class was the greatest restriction to the 5-star Army and Yang Xie. This was especially true for some of the nobles. Although the dynasties changed frequently, they would never fall. People like this who only cared about their own interests and had no loyalty to the current dynasty would often become new meritorious officials of a new dynasty. There was nothing wrong with killing such people who had no ruler, no country, and no father. Only by killing all of these people would the 5-star Army have a better chance of conquering and controlling the land. Not only that, if they did it well, they would gain the support of the commoners. In comparison, the commoners were the ones who suffered the most. They had been oppressed by these nobles for who knew how many years. Some of them had been oppressed since their ancestors, so it was impossible for them to not be angry. The only reason why they didn't say anything was because they were too cowardly and didn't have enough strength. Since it was like this, the 5-star Army could help them and be the leader. Reality proved that this was indeed quite effective. This was because in many places, especially the commoners who had been oppressed by the nobles, began to look forward to the arrival of the 5-star Army. Some of the more far-sighted ones had already brought their travel expenses with them to find the 5-star Army and join them. Their many years of life experience told them that only the 5-star Army could save them. Only the 5-star Army could help them change their lives. Bai Shuang fully understood his teacher Yang Qindong's philosophy and did as he was told. The result was that not only did the strength of the foreign race's first army not decrease, it was instead continuously expanding. As for the young and strong civilians who wanted to join the army, he accepted them all and organized them into the 4 divisions under his command. With the presence of these people, they would be more familiar with and understand the surrounding environment. Some of the following military battle plans would also be better supplemented and perfected. The effect was so good that Yang Qindong had never thought of it before. Compared to the first army, the progress of the new 5 armies was also very smooth. Even though they didn't recruit the local commoners as soldiers, because there was a RAF who understood the Yirkiang tribe extremely well, this captured general completely stood on the side of the 5-star army. Based on his understanding of the Yirkiang tribe, the new 5-star army could often achieve twice the results with half the effort. Their entry also gave King Agudemu a huge headache. Unlike King Baelide, the Yarkiang's King Agudemu chose to fight head-on. He had sent out 100,000 cavalrymen to search for the main force of the new 5-star army, and wanted to have a decisive battle with them. In his mind, this was his territory, and he had the advantage in terms of timing, location, and manpower. He also had a huge advantage in terms of military strength. Why couldn't he deal a heavy blow to the 5-star army and win a huge victory? However, how could Commander Shi Wanshan, who fully followed Yang Qindong's orders, do as he wished? He was originally a general of the Great Ming Dynasty, and had a deep understanding of Sun Tzu's art of war. Based on Araf's introduction of the situation, he and his opponent started to engage in guerrilla warfare. For a moment, both sides were fighting back and forth, and neither side had a clear winner. Compared to the first army and the new 5-star army, the new army led by Su He quickly encountered a huge nail. He continuously bypassed many important cities, and arrived at the Iron Gate Pass to attack the rear of the Turkopan kingdom. At that moment, 100,000 cavalrymen were rushing towards their location. They were the reinforcements sent by the Kazakh Empire to support the 3 countries. The general leading them was still Janibek Khan's younger brother, Keliai. Last time, he had brought 80,000 soldiers, and lost 30,000 of them. This made him feel extremely ashamed. This time, when he set out for the second time, he had already made a decision. He had also fully absorbed the experience of the previous battle. He wanted to lead the army alone. Keliai had always believed that his previous defeat wasn't because he was inferior to the 5-star army, but because his allies weren't strong enough. As the saying goes, don't fear a godlike opponent, but fear a pig-like opponent. This was what he thought. This time, he didn't inform anyone that he was leading an army of 100,000. He also didn't have any intention of joining forces with any country. Apart from contacting them when he needed provisions, he spent the rest of his time traveling alone. He wanted to find the main force of the 5-star army, and have a decisive battle with them. The heavens seemed to know what he was thinking, and gave him a chance. When he learned from the scouts that there was a 30,000-strong 5-star army just 150 li away from them, he became extremely excited. Good, very good. Pass down the order for the army to speed up. We must surround the 30,000 5-star army. When moving behind the enemy lines, without enough information, it was easy to fall into danger. Su He felt a great amount of pressure. The number of scouts he sent out was sufficient, and the distance they covered was far enough. This was the reason why he didn't lose. With the existence of these excellent scouts, the moment the 100,000 Kazakh Empire troops appeared 100 li away, the news was sent back. When he learned that the enemy had 100,000 cavalrymen, the first thing Su He did wasn't to run away, but to calm down and consider whether or not he could take down these 100,000 soldiers. 30,000 against 100,000, and he still wanted to take down the enemy. This was no different from a snake trying to swallow an elephant. In the eyes of others, this was overestimating one's capabilities. However, in the eyes of Su He and his new army, this really wasn't an impossible task. It was because of the 3 armies sent to attack the enemy's rear. His new army was the closest to Yang Qindong's main force, as well as the one with the highest chance of receiving assistance in the shortest amount of time. Send a report to the 6th young master, tell him about the situation here, tell him about our plans to take down the enemy and our battle plan. After just a stick of incense's time, Su He made his decision. He wanted to create a miracle. The messenger quickly left after receiving the order. Su He then said to the 4 division commanders at his side, inform the soldiers to rest here. We need to recover our strength in preparation for the great battle. When he saw how confident Su he was, the 4th Cavalry Division's commander Chang Bo couldn't help but feel worried. Military commander, will the king agree to our request? These words attracted the attention of the other 3 division commanders. It was clear that this was also a question they were concerned about. However, Su He's expression didn't seem to care as he said, if the 6th young master agrees, then we'll fight this battle well. If he doesn't agree, then we'll retreat. It's just a moment of rest. Su He's meaning was extremely clear. He wasn't sure if Yang Chendong would agree, so he made 2 preparations. Would Yang Chendong agree? When the telegram was sent, he didn't immediately give an answer. Instead, he stared at the telegram for a long time. The Kazakh Empire and the Aries dynasty had sent a total of 250,000 cavalrymen to aid the Middle Kingdom. He had already received the news from the intelligence department. Yang Chendong welcomed their troops because it gave him an excuse to invade the 2 countries. Just like when he entered the Ili region, didn't he also say that he wanted to take revenge? Even though the matter of Ili sending troops had happened a long time ago, this excuse was a bit forced. But even if it was an excuse, who cared if it was prudent or not? And now, these 2 countries had given him a legitimate reason. Of course, it couldn't be any better. However, it was still 250,000 cavalrymen after all. How could it be so easy to deal with them? Yang Chendong did not have enough preparation to deal with them, nor did he know what kind of environment and conditions to fight them. On the battlefield, opportunities were constantly changing. Many sudden events didn't give you time to prepare. Now, the opportunity had come. The new army wanted to fight 100,000 Kazakh cavalry. What he had to do was agree or disagree. If he agreed, then it was just a question of who to send as reinforcements. Yang Chendong wasn't so arrogant as to think that the new army could stop 100,000 Kazakh cavalry with only 30,000 people. But what if he sent some reinforcements? Come, call Tianhu and Lingdaqiang over. On the battlefield, the 1st Cavalry Division had no place to be used. They were only brought along to guard against sudden events. Now that the opportunity had appeared, it couldn't be better to send this army. As for the 4th Infantry Division, when sieging the city, they didn't need a division's strength. 1 regiment was enough. The remaining 3 regiments could also be sent to support the new army. In this way, even though their military strength wasn't as good as the enemy's, in terms of military strength, it wasn't wrong to say that they surpassed the enemy's. In particular, the 3 regiments of the Cold Front were fully equipped with firearms. Once they were sent out, they would definitely have an unexpected effect. Arriving in front of the sand table, after a serious and careful search, Yang Chendong determined the battlefield. He waved his right hand and smashed the sand table at the location of Badian Mound. His eyes flashed with an intimidating light. Badian Mound was located on the west side of Boston Lake. On both sides of the lake were tall mountains. It stretched for more than 20 kilometers and was a good place to set up an ambush. Choosing the battlefield here could achieve the effect of heavily injuring the 100,000 Kazakh cavalry. At that time, they could use the method of blocking the head, cutting the waist, and cutting the tail to maximize the results of the battle and establish the 5-star army's chances of victory. In order to achieve the best results, Yang Chendong decided to personally lead the troops into battle. The battle involved the 4th Infantry Division, the entire World Cavalry Division, and the entire new army. In order to fully display the advantages of these units and ensure that they cooperated well, Yang Chendong had to personally lead them. Very quickly, Tianhu and Lingdaqiang came in front of Yang Chendong and told him his thoughts. As for the ambush location and the ambush of the Kazakh army, both Tianhu and Lingdaqiang had no objections. They were clear that once the 100,000 Kazakh cavalry entered the battlefield, it could disrupt the military plans of the army and cause a lot of trouble. However, to achieve the effect of this ambush, and for the military plans to be completed smoothly, there was another point that couldn't be ignored. That was whether or not the Turpan army would send out their troops. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.